Hey guys, tonight we are heading behind the powdered footmen and the rented pineapples into the gloriously absurd world of the filthy rich in Regency England, a place so drenched in luxury that it makes modern billionaire culture look like a tasteful little side hustle. Not with industry, not with invention, not even with particularly hard work. No, with starched neckties, 100-dish dinners, and gambling debts large enough to frighten an entire government. I'm really glad you're spending the night with me. And if these slow wanders through the past are easing you towards sleep, a quiet tap of like and subscribe keeps the channel going. Drop a comment telling me where you're listening from and what one ludicrous luxury you would absolutely rent for a single evening to impress your guests. Now get comfortable. Switch off the lamp, pull the covers high and loosen whatever you're wearing, because the people in tonight's story were laced, buttoned, and starched into outfits that took longer to assemble than this entire video. Could a grown man really spend 5 hours getting dressed and still call the necktie the hard part? How does a person owe his tailor for years while settling his card debts before breakfast? Why the most exclusive ballroom in London served nothing stronger than lemonade? What the Regency equivalent of being left on read was? Who decided that fruit should be rented? And could you survive a world where being 7 minutes late got you turned away at the door, even if you had just personally defeated Napoleon? Congratulations. You just woke up in Mayfair, London, in the year 1815. Your shirts are whiter than your prospects. There is a stream of live goldfish running down somebody's dinner table. Your valet has just discarded his fourth failed cravat of the morning, and a committee of 6 women you have never met is quietly deciding whether you are allowed to dance on Wednesday. Good luck. You wake up around 9, which is considered early, in a bed roughly the size of a small boat. You have not opened your eyes for more than a moment before someone else is in the room. A maid has crept in to revive the fire and draw back the curtains, and your own personal servant is already laying out the first of several outfits you will be poured into today. You have not yet stood up. You have not yet spoken. And already, more people are involved in your morning than you actually know by name. The fire is the first miracle, and you did not perform it. A housemaid named Suki was up before dawn, crept in on her knees, swept yesterday's ashes into a box, and built and lit a fresh fire so that the room would be warm by the time your eyes opened. She is gone before you stir. This is the whole art of her job. The warmth simply exists, like weather, and you are not meant to picture the cold hands that made it. Your bedroom is not, in any modern sense, private. People move through it the way pigeons move through a square, with purpose and without apology. The maid with the water, the maid with the linen, the one who tends the grate. You are the still centre of a small, busy economy, and the economy has been running for hours while you slept like a contented walrus. There is, of course, the question of the night. There is no bathroom attached to this magnificent room. There is a chamber pot, tucked discreetly into a stand or a commode, and there is a person whose morning includes carrying it away. You do not think about this person. Thinking about this person is not part of the arrangement. The pot is full, and then, as if by enchantment, it is not. The bed itself earns your opinion, though you could not say why. It is deep, warm, and enormous. The hangings around it are not decoration. They are insulation against a house that has no central heating and takes the English winter personally. You have slept inside a fabric box, warm as a loaf, while the rooms beyond the curtains sat at roughly the temperature of a churchyard. Now your servant approaches with the day's first decision, which is not yours to make. He has already chosen what you will wear before noon, because choosing is a skill and he has it and you frankly do not. He holds the shirt the way a priest holds something sacred. You lift your arms, you are dressed the way a monument is unveiled, in stages, by professionals. The truly strange part is the silence of it. Nobody chatters. A good servant is meant to be neither seen nor heard beyond the strict requirements of the task, which means your morning unfolds in a kind of choreographed hush, broken only by the small sounds of cloth and water and the fire settling. You could go an hour barely speaking, and have a great deal accomplished on your behalf. You have not earned this morning, and you will not earn the afternoon. The money that pays for Suki's dawn and the chamber pot's disappearance comes from land you have likely never walked, worked by tenants whose names would mean nothing to you. It arrives as rent, quietly, the way the fire arrives, and you receive it with the same untroubled assumption that warm rooms and clean linen are simply the natural order of things. At last you sit up, in your boat of a bed, in your box of warm curtains, in a house full of people pretending to be furniture. The day stretches ahead with nothing pressing in it, and everything arranged. You are rich, you are rested, and you have, so far, accomplished the considerable feat of waking up. Breakfast, somewhere below, is already becoming your problem to consume, and somebody else's to produce. You are a gentleman, and your entire morning is now devoted to getting dressed. This is not an exaggeration, and it is not laziness. Your valet stands ready with a stack of stiff white linen, and the central event of your day is the tying of a single necktie. The cravat must be starched to the texture of a roof tile, then wrapped, folded, and dented into place by lowering your chin onto it with the solemnity of a man diffusing something. If the first crease is wrong, you start again. The man who invented this madness is George Brummel, and he is not even an aristocrat. His grandfather was a servant. Yet through nothing but taste, nerve, and a frankly unreasonable interest in linen, he has become the man every gentleman in England copies, including the future king, who considers him a friend right up until they stop speaking. Brummel's great idea, strangely, was restraint. No jewels, no embroidery, no coloured silks. Just immaculate cloth, perfect cut, and a necktie arranged with the patience of a cathedral being built. The starch is the secret and the curse. A limp cravat is the mark of a man who has given up on himself. So the linen is stiffened until it could stand on its own in the corner, and then you must somehow fold it into elegant architecture without cracking it, while it resists you like a sheet of pastry that has decided it has standing in the matter. Your valet, a patient man named Fletcher, holds out the morning's first attempt. You raise your chin. He drapes. He tucks. He lowers your jaw a precise inch so the fabric creases into the fashionable knot. You glance in the glass. A line is wrong. Fletcher says nothing, takes it away, and brings a fresh one, and the failed cravat joins the others. There is a famous story about exactly this. A visitor to Brummel's dressing room asked his valet what he was carrying, and the man, arms loaded with crumpled white linen, replied simply, "These are our failures." An entire armful of discarded neckties before lunch. That is the standard you are now quietly competing with, and you are losing. The boots are their own theatre. They must shine like wet ink, and the rumour, which Brummel did nothing to discourage, is that the finest shine comes from polishing the leather with champagne. Whether or not it works, the point is made. You are a man who would pour wine on his footwear rather than tolerate a dull toe. The boots gleam. Fletcher's knuckles do the gleaming. The coat is the next ordeal, and it is cut to fit you like a second, more disciplined skin. There is no slipping into it. Fletcher eases it up your arms while you hold yourself rigid, and once it is on, you can lift your arms to roughly the height of a man surrendering and no higher. The cut is the whole point. Comfort was never invited to this part of the day. Now stand back and survey the result. Hours have passed, the fire has been fed twice, a small mountain of rejected linen sits in a basket, and you have produced at last an appearance of complete and effortless simplicity, a look that says you simply threw this on and walked out the door, which is the most expensive lie in London. The deep absurdity is that the simpler the look, the more labour it conceals. Anyone can hide a clumsy job under jewels and lace. To stake your reputation on a plain white knot and a black boot is to bet everything on the details, and the details have taken your whole morning and another man's whole career. You are, finally, dressed. It is nearly afternoon, and the only thing you have accomplished today is to look as though dressing cost you no effort at all. You are a lady, and you are being laced into the day. First the shift, then the stays, which your maid tightens at your back while you hold the bedpost and breathe in a way you will continue to regret for hours. Over this goes a gown of fine white muslin so thin you can see daylight through it, which is the entire point. It is, at this moment, distinctly cold in the house. The fabric does not care. Fashion has decided you live in Greece, and your wardrobe has agreed. Fashion this season is obsessed with looking like a Greek statue, and your gown obeys it completely. Gone are the great, hooped, boned, weaponized dresses your grandmother wore, the ones you could have hidden a spaniel under. In their place is a high waist drawn up under the bust and a long, narrow column of pale muslin falling straight to the floor. You look, ideally, like something carved in marble. You also feel, accurately, like something left out in marble weather. Your lady's maid, Mrs. Pruitt, manages this transformation with the brisk competence of a field surgeon. She lays the stays, she draws the laces, she settles the gown over your head without disturbing a single hair, and she does it all while keeping up a running internal inventory of every other woman's wardrobe in town. Mrs. Pruitt knows who has a new gown before its owner has worn it twice. Her loyalty is total and her information network is terrifying. The muslin is the heart of the whole problem. It is genuinely beautiful, woven so fine it drapes like water and floats when you walk. It is also imported from India at considerable cost, and it provides roughly the warmth of an enthusiastic roomer. In an English drawing room in winter, a true devotee of fashion is essentially wearing a suggestion. There is a wilder version of this, whispered about rather than admitted. The very daring are said to dampen the muslin so it clings and turns nearly transparent, a trick that belongs to women of scandalous reputation rather than to anyone received in polite houses. You will not be doing this, but you will hear about those who do, in the same hushed tone reserved for people who have run off with the wrong sort of officer. Underneath, the stays do their quiet work. They are not the iron cages of legend, but they support, they smooth, they lift, and they insist on a posture that makes lounging an act of rebellion. You sit upright because the garment has decided the matter for you. Slouching is not a choice you are physically permitted to make. Now the practical defences arrive, because nobody actually wants to die for fashion, only to flirt with it. A petticoat for warmth, a shawl for the shoulders, long gloves above the elbow, because bare arms are for evening and the cold is for everyone. The shawl, draped just so, becomes its own art form, an entire language of how it falls and how casually you appear not to be clutching it for dear life. The danger underneath all this prettiness is not imaginary. Consumption, the wasting cough that kills something like 1 in 7 people, stalks this era, and a generation of women dressing for a Mediterranean climate they do not actually inhabit are not helping their odds. A chill caught at a draughty ball is treated as romantic misfortune rather than the predictable result of wearing curtains in January, Mrs. Pruitt steps back at last and surveys you with the eye of an artist who is also keeping score. You are pale, upright, and elegant, swathed in fabric that flatters everything and warms nothing. You will spend the day pretending you are not cold, because admitting it would mean admitting the whole beautiful scheme is faintly absurd. The statue does not shiver. Neither, in company, will you. You've decided you would like a bath, and you have just set roughly 4 people in motion. There is no tap to turn. Every drop of hot water for your tub must be heated in the kitchen far below and carried up the stairs by hand, one heavy bucket at a time, by servants who will then carry it all back down again once it has gone grey and cold. A full bath costs 6 or 8 trips, so you weigh the matter, as the rich do, and decide whether being clean is worth the staircase. The tub itself is no marble pool. It is a hip bath, a modest tin or copper basin shaped to sit in rather than lie in, hauled out and set before the bedroom fire for the occasion. You do not float in it. You crouch in it, knees up, in a posture more suited to inspecting your own toes than to luxuriating, while the warmth lasts roughly as long as your patience. The water is the real labour, and it is somebody else's. A footman named Tom hauls it up from the kitchen, where it has been heated over the fire, climbing flight after flight with 2 full buckets and a face that has learned not to have an opinion. He fills the tub, then waits, then returns to carry the cooled water down again. By the time you are clean, Tom has climbed your staircase more times than you will all week. Let's be honest about how often this actually happens, which is not often. A full immersion is an event, planned and dreaded by the staff. Day to day, you keep yourself presentable the cheaper way, with a basin of water, a cloth, and a brisk wash of the parts that show. The real badge of cleanliness is not your skin at all. It is your linen. This is the secret of Regency hygiene, and it is a clever one. You change your shirt or your shift constantly, sometimes several times a day, and a fresh white garment against the skin is taken as proof of a clean person underneath. The linen does the work that the bath does not. You are, in a sense, dry cleaning yourself by changing your clothes and hoping for the best. The soap, when you use it, is a luxury in its own right. A good scented ball of it, soft in the hand and perfumed with herb oils, costs real money, while the cheaper stuff is made of mutton fat and wood ash and smells faintly of the sheep it came from. You hold the scented kind like a small treasure, because it more or less is one. Now consider the picture the costume dramas sell you, all rose petals and steam and gleaming porcelain. In fact, the reality is a chilly tin basin, a tired footman, and a great deal of energy spent masking smells rather than removing their causes. The perfume is not decoration. The perfume is infrastructure. Everyone is quietly managing the gap between how they wish to smell and how the plumbing allows. A strange democracy hides in this, if you squint. The labour is heavy, thankless, and invisible. The grandest duchess and the poorest maid both live in a world where hot water must be carried, where bathing is a chore rather than a habit, where the body is a problem to be managed rather than a thing to be soaked. Your money buys you Tom and his buckets. It does not buy you a pipe in the wall. The fire pops beside you as you sit in your shrinking warmth, knees folded, and the water grows reluctant. You will be clean for the evening, which is what matters, because the evening is where you will be seen. Tom is already on the stairs again, going down this time, carrying away the proof. The whole grand performance of your cleanliness has cost one woman's vanity and one man's knees, and only one of you will remember it tomorrow. You sit before the glass and prepare your mouth for society. You dip a frayed brush into a tin of gritty tooth powder and scrub, because your diet is built on sugar, and your teeth have noticed. The powder tastes of chalk and something medicinal. Afterward you tuck a sugared comfit into your cheek or chew a sprig of mint, not for pleasure but for cover, because everyone around you is doing precisely the same calculation. Behind the perfume and the powder, the whole glittering world is quietly managing its own breath. It begins with the sugar, which is everywhere because you can afford it. Sugar is a luxury, and luxuries are meant to be displayed, so your table groans with sweet creams, candied fruit, sugared almonds, and confections built like little monuments. Your wealth is, quite literally, rotting your teeth, and the better your cook, the worse your gums. The poor, eating their coarse bread, keep their teeth far longer, which is the kind of irony nobody at your table cares to dwell on. The tooth powder is your main line of defense, and it is a mixed blessing. Some recipes are harmless chalk and herbs. Others contain ingredients abrasive enough to scour the enamel clean off, so that the very thing you scrub with to save your teeth is quietly sanding them down. You brush with a frayed bristle brush or a frayed end of stick, and you tell yourself it is working, because the alternative is unthinkable. When a tooth goes truly bad, the options are medieval and brief. There is no dentistry worth the name, only extraction, performed by a man with strong wrists and a pair of pliers, and no particular interest in your comfort. You can have a rotten tooth pulled, and then you can have a gap, and the wealthy sometimes have that gap filled with a false tooth of porcelain or, more grimly, a real tooth bought from someone poorer or pulled from the dead. Breath is the next campaign, and the whole town is fighting it. The air at close quarters can be sour, heavy, and alarming. With teeth in this condition and no real cleaning, bad breath is simply the background condition of human company, and an enormous amount of quiet effort goes into masking it. You chew mint. You suck comfits. You stand, perhaps, a polite half-step further back than affection alone would dictate. There is a woman named Mrs. Calloway who attends every gathering you do, and she has perfected the art of speaking with one hand drifting near her mouth, a fan, a handkerchief, a thoughtful gesture, anything to put a screen between her words and your nose. You took it for shyness once. You now recognize it for the seasoned tactic it is. Half the elegant little gestures of polite society are, on closer inspection, breath management dressed up as grace. The perfume does the rest of the heavy lifting. You and everyone you know move through the day in a personal cloud of scent, not as an indulgence, but as a necessity, because the alternative is to smell like exactly what you are, a person who rarely bathes and whose mouth is staging a slow rebellion. The rose water and the lavender are not there to make you lovely. They are there to make you bearable. What ties it all together is the strange dignity with which it is done. Nobody admits to the bad breath. Nobody mentions the abrasive powder or the bought teeth. The whole apparatus runs on the silent agreement that everyone will pretend everyone else smells of flowers, and that the mints and the fans and the careful half-steps backward are simply manners, nothing more. You finish at the glass, mouth scoured and scented and braced for the day, and you go down to face a roomful of people running the identical scheme. You will smile with your lips slightly closed. You will lean in only so far. And the great secret of the beautiful, glittering Regency, The one the paintings never show is that it spent half its energy quietly trying not to be smelled. You come down to breakfast at an hour that would scandalize a farmer, because the fashionable day starts late and ends later. On the table waits chocolate or tea, rolls, and a silver rack of toast going cold at its own pace. Beside your plate sits the real business of breakfast. The morning post, a small avalanche of letters, cards, and invitations that must be sorted into the accepted, the declined, and the cleverly avoided. You butter your roll with one hand and rearrange your entire social future with the other. The lateness is the point. A labourer has been at work for 5 hours by the time you lift your chocolate, and that is precisely the contrast you are paying for. To rise late is to announce that nothing in the world requires your early attention, that the day will wait for you rather than the other way round. Idleness, performed correctly, is the loudest statement of wealth there is. The food is light, almost an afterthought, a spread so dainty a determined moth could carry it off. Tea or coffee or chocolate, fresh rolls, some toast, perhaps a little cold meat if the household runs to it. The great groaning meals come later in the day. Breakfast is fuel and ceremony, a soft landing into a morning that has no intention of being strenuous, and you take it slowly because there is, gloriously, nothing else you must do. The post is where breakfast turns into work, the only work you will do all day. The letters arrive in a heap, and among them are the invitations, and the invitations are a battlefield. There are events you long to attend, events you must attend, events you would die before attending, and events whose hostesses you wish neither to please nor to openly insult. Each requires a reply, and each reply is a small act of strategy. This is where your secretary, or your own careful pen, earns its keep. An invitation accepted commits your evening and signals your allegiance. An invitation declined must be declined warmly enough to avoid offence, yet vaguely enough to leave room, should something better appear. You learn to plead a prior engagement that does not strictly exist, a manoeuvre everyone uses and everyone sees through and everyone politely accepts anyway. There is an art to the regrets, and the formidable Lady Wexcombe is its undisputed master. She can decline a dinner in 3 lines so gracious that the snubbed hostess feels honoured to have been refused, then spend the freed evening somewhere grander without a trace of guilt. You have watched her do it. You are taking notes. The cruelty is total and the wording is impeccable. Meanwhile, the cards keep their own quiet ledger. Who has called, whose card sits in the bowl in the hall, whose attentions are warming and whose are cooling. Breakfast is when you read the temperature of your entire acquaintance, all of it encoded in paper, all of it requiring a response calibrated to the half degree. By the time the toast is truly cold, you have made a dozen decisions that will shape your week. The newspapers come too, full of war and parliament and the doings of the great, and you read them less for the news than for the names. Who was seen where, whose horse won, whose marriage is rumoured. You are not so much informing yourself as keeping current, because to be out of date in conversation tonight would be a small social death, and conversation is the field on which you actually compete. So you finish your chocolate, your future neatly sorted into piles of accepted and declined, your replies dispatched by a footman before the cups are cleared. You have eaten almost nothing, and decided almost everything. The morning, what little of it remains, now opens before you, soft and unhurried and entirely yours, and you rise from the table having done the hardest thing you will do all day, which was answer your mail. You hold a small rectangle of stiff paper with your name on it, and you are about to wield it like a chess piece. This is your calling card, and the rules around it are vast and unforgiving. You leave it at the houses of people you wish to acknowledge. A footman receives it on a silver tray, and whether your card is returned, and how quickly, tells you precisely where you stand. A folded corner means one thing, a card left in person means another. Nobody explains the system. You are simply expected to already know it. The card itself is plain, just your name engraved on good stock, and its plainness is deceptive. This little slip of paper is a passport, a weapon, and a confession all at once. Leaving it announces that you exist, and that you have noticed someone worth noticing. Failing to leave it where it is owed is a snub so precise it could be measured with instruments. Consider the choreography. You drive to a house, and rather than going in, you often simply send your footman to the door with the card. He presents it on the tray, the receiving footman takes it, and you drive on having paid your respects without speaking to a soul. An entire relationship can be maintained for months purely by the silent traffic of paper between front halls. The corners carry, meaning the way flags do, each fold small, deliberate, and legible. A corner turned down can signal that you came in person rather than sending a servant, which is the more flattering gesture. Different corners, folded different ways, communicate condolence, congratulation, or a farewell before leaving town. You fold your card like a man sending a coded telegram, and the recipient unfolds your intentions over breakfast. The great test is the return. When you leave your card, you are opening an account, and the other party must decide whether to settle it. A card returned promptly says the acquaintance is welcome. A card returned slowly says you are tolerated. A card not returned at all says, with devastating courtesy, that you have been weighed and found insufficient, and that no scene will be made about it because no scene is necessary. There is a footman named Hargood in a house you call upon, and he is the true gatekeeper of the establishment. It is Hargood who decides, on his mistress's standing orders, whether the lady of the house is at home, which has nothing to do with whether she is physically present and everything to do with whether she wishes to see you. He says, "Her ladyship is not at home," with a perfectly straight face, while her ladyship sits 20 feet away, and you both honour the fiction completely. This phrase, "not at home," is the polite machinery's masterpiece. It is never a lie, exactly, because everyone understands it does not mean what it says. It means not at home to you, today, for reasons that may be mood, maybe strategy, or maybe a slow campaign of exclusion conducted entirely through a footman's level voice. You retreat with your card, and you read the message, and you adjust. The whole system is a way of conducting the fiercest social warfare without ever once being rude. No doors are slammed, no voices are raised. Everything happens in the gap between what is said and what is meant, in folded corners and returned paper and a servant's impassive announcement, and to survive it you must learn to hear the meaning that the manners are built to muffle. Back in your carriage, card delivered, intentions filed, you wait to see what comes back across the city in answer. Somewhere a footman is carrying your name on a tray to a woman who will decide your week with a glance. It is absurd that so much should ride on so little, but the paper is the game, the tray is the board, and you have been playing it since you were old enough to have a name worth engraving. You set out to pay your morning calls, which you do naturally in the afternoon. In this world, the morning means everything before dinner, so a visit at 2 o'clock is still, technically, a morning call, and arguing about it marks you as someone who has to think about these things. You are admitted, you sit, you discuss the weather and the health of relatives you have never met, and you watch the clock. 15 minutes is correct. 30 is generous. Stay longer than that and you become the thing everyone discusses after you leave. Timing is the first trap. Call too early and you intrude on a household not yet arranged for company. Call too late and you collide with a long march toward dinner. There is a narrow correct window, roughly 1 o'clock to 4 in town, and stepping outside it is the sort of error that gets your name attached to a quiet, lasting verdict about your manners. When you are shown in, the visit follows a script so familiar you could perform it asleep. You are seated. You remark upon the weather, which is always either too hot, too cold, or threatening. You inquire after the family. You contribute 1 or 2 harmless observations. You decline or accept a small refreshment, and you keep, always, one eye on the relentless clock. That clock governs everything, and its verdicts are silent, precise, and unforgiving. The correct call is short. You are not there to have a conversation in any real sense. You are there to be seen to have called, to deposit your presence and your goodwill and then to leave promptly, making room for the next caller and sparing your hostess the agony of a guest who does not understand that the visit was always meant to be brief. The overstayer is a recognised menace, and everyone has a name for theirs. Yours is a Mr. Pelham, who settles into the best chair as though he has signed a lease, launches into the full account of his gout, and shows no awareness whatsoever that 3 other callers have come and gone while he describes his ankle. Your hostess smiles at Mr. Pelham with the fixed serenity of a woman, calculating exactly how much of her afternoon he intends to consume. The refreshments themselves are a minor minefield. Cake and wine, or tea, may be offered, and whether you accept depends on the hour, the closeness of the acquaintance, and a dozen unspoken signals. Accept too eagerly, and you look greedy. Refuse too firmly, and you look cold. You take a little, you praise it lightly, and you do not, under any circumstances, ask for more. Meanwhile, the lady of the house is performing her own quiet labour, the labour of being at home. To be at home is a deliberate state, declared in advance, and she has set aside these hours to receive whoever the footman judges worthy of admission. It is exhausting in its own way, this readiness to be visited, this obligation to be charming on a schedule to a parade of people she may or may not actually wish to see. The genius of the whole arrangement is its efficiency. In a single afternoon, moving briskly from house to house, you can maintain a dozen relationships, register a dozen small loyalties, and gather a dozen pieces of news, all without committing to a single real conversation. It is friendship reduced to its lightest possible form, a network kept warm by frequent, shallow, perfectly timed contact. So you rise at the 14-minute mark before anyone could possibly wish you to stay, and you make your graceful exit while you are still wanted. That timing is the whole skill. Leave them faintly sorry to see you go, and your card will always be returned. Linger like poor Mr. Pelham, and you will find, soon enough, that the footman regrets her ladyship is not at home. You climb back into the carriage and direct it to the next door, where the same 15 minutes await. You command a household of 20 people, and you do it almost entirely through two of them. You do not tell the kitchen maid anything. You tell the housekeeper, who tells the kitchen maid. You do not address the grooms. You speak to the butler, who carries your wishes downward into a basement world of bells and back stairs you will rarely see. Your home runs on the labour of people trained to vanish the instant their work is done. The fires are simply lit. The meals simply appear. You are not meant to wonder how. The structure beneath you is as rigid as anything in Parliament. At the top stand the upper servants, the butler and the housekeeper, who give orders and answer only to you. Below them spread the lower servants, the housemaids and footmen and kitchen maids and grooms, who take orders and do the actual lifting, scrubbing, and carrying. The gap between an upper and a lower servant is, in its way, as wide as the gap between you and any of them. Your housekeeper, Mrs. Dunmore, runs the female half of this world with a ring of keys at her waist that she guards like a crown jewel. Those keys open the linen press, the still room, the stores of tea and sugar and candles, and whoever holds them holds real power, Mrs. Dunmore dispenses the sugar by her own hand, locks the cupboard after, and notes the level, because in a house this size, theft is a daily temptation, and trust is rationed as carefully as the loaf sugar. Let's talk about the bells, the nervous system of the entire house. A wire runs from every principal room down to a row of bells in the servants' hall, each one labelled, and when you tug a cord in the drawing room, a bell jangles below, and a servant drops whatever she is doing and climbs. You never go to them. They come to you, summoned by a wire. The back stairs are how this magic stays invisible. A grand house is built with two sets of passages, the fine ones for you and the hidden ones for them, so that coal, chamber pots and tired maids move through the building without ever crossing your path. You glide through bright rooms while a parallel world of narrow dark corridors hums along behind the walls. Your butler, Mr. Garrow, is the male commander and the public face of the staff. He oversees the footmen, guards the wine cellar with the devotion of a dragon, announces your guests, and presides at the great moments of the dining room. A good butler like Garrow can run a dinner for 20 with a few glances and a lifted finger, conducting his footmen like an orchestra while appearing to do nothing at all. The wages that hold this together are, by your standards, almost nothing. Garrow earns perhaps £50 a year, Mrs. Dunmore rather less, a footman less still, and a young maid least of all, somewhere in the single pounds, plus her board and a bed in a cold attic. You spend more on a single evening's entertaining than several of them will earn in a year. What you buy with all this is the most precious luxury of the age, which is not the food or the fires, but the not noticing. You live inside a machine of human labour engineered to feel like nature. The hot water rises, the dishes clear, the rooms warm, the carriage waits, and none of it appears to require a single human being, because the human beings have been trained their whole lives to disappear at the moment of being seen. You ring the bell, and Mrs. Dunmore appears, and you make your wishes known in a sentence, and the sentence travels down through the keys and the bells and the back stairs and becomes warmth, food, and order. You will never see most of the hands it passes through. That, precisely, is what you are paying for, and the house keeps its bargain so well that you can go a whole day believing comfort grows on the walls. You are hiring a footman, and his references matter less than his calves. The truly fashionable footman is tall, well-built, and ideally matched to a second footman of the same height, so the pair flank your door like a set of bookends in livery. You will powder his hair, dress him in an embroidered coat, and pay a government tax for the privilege of doing so, because powder and male servants are both taxed luxuries. He carries notes and trays and stands very still. He is, in plain terms, an ornament that breathes, and you have chosen him accordingly. It is all pure display. A maid works out of sight, but a footman is seen, in the hall, behind the carriage, at the table, and so his looks become part of the picture you present to the world. A short, ordinary footman would do the work just as well and embarrass you the entire time. So you hire for height, for a fine leg, for a face that flatters the household, and the actual duties come second to the silhouette. The livery is where your money announces itself. You dress him in a coat of your chosen colours, trimmed and braided and frankly grander than anything he could ever buy himself, and the whole point is that the splendour is yours, not his. He is a walking advertisement, and the advertisement reads, "This family can afford to put embroidery on the help." The hair powder captures the whole absurdity, a fashion at once dated, costly, and pointless. To powder a footman's hair, you must buy the powder, and the government, ever alert to where the money is, taxes it. So you are paying a tax for the privilege of making your servant's head white. Long after the fashionable have given up powdering their own hair as old-fashioned, they keep powdering the footman, because the footman is a costume and the costume is allowed to be dated. Your two footmen are called, as footmen often are, by names chosen for convenience rather than birth, and yours are simply James and John, whatever their mothers actually named them. James, the taller by half an inch, takes the place of honour. The pair of them stand at your door matched like a span of carriage horses, and visitors note the effect exactly as you intend them to. The work itself, when it comes, is a peculiar mix of the trivial and the strenuous. James carries a single calling card across town on a silver tray with the gravity of a man bearing the crown. Then he rides on the back of your carriage in all weathers, clinging to a small perch, ornamental and frozen, because a fashionable carriage must have a footman hanging off the back of it. There is real cost in this beyond the wages and the tax. A man hired to be tall and decorative is a man whose comfort is nobody's concern. He stands for hours. He waits in cold halls. He rides the back of the carriage through rain because the look requires it, and he maintains, throughout, the smooth, unbothered face that the livery seems to demand. The ornament is not permitted to look like it minds being an ornament, and yet the position is sought after, which tells you something about the alternatives. A footman in a good house eats well, sleeps dry, wears finer cloth than most labourers will touch in a lifetime, and stands close to power even if he will never hold any. James knows precisely what he is, a handsome fixture in a rich man's hall, and he plays the part with a straight back because the part, for all its indignities, beats the field and the factory. Your door is flanked, your carriage is trimmed with a clinging man, and your household glitters by exactly half an inch more than your neighbour's. The footman stands, the powder holds, the silhouette is perfect, and somewhere underneath the braid a real person waits, very still, to be told he may at last sit down. You go shopping and you do not pay for a single thing. You order silk, gloves, wine, a new saddle, and the shopkeeper bows and enters it all in a ledger, because a person of your rank settles accounts later, much later, possibly never. The tradesman has no real power to make you pay, and you both understand this, so you accumulate. The bills pile up in a drawer somewhere, growing quietly, while the people who actually made your boots wait months to be paid. Money, to you, is a thing other people worry about on your behalf. The whole transaction is built on the strange power of your name. You do not produce coins. You produce yourself, your rank, your address in the right square, and the shop extends credit on the strength of it, because having a duke's daughter on the books is itself a kind of advertisement. The grander your custom, the more eager the shop is to be unpaid by you, which is an arrangement so backward it could only exist among the very rich. The actual experience of shopping is pleasant precisely because money never appears, a ritual smooth, unhurried, and weightless. In a fine draper's, bolts of silk are unrolled across the counter for your inspection while you sit, and you choose with the leisure of someone who will never see a price tag. You simply select, and nod, and move on. The shopkeeper, for his part, performs a careful dance. A draper named Mr. Yarrow bows you to a chair, sends a boy for the better stock kept in back, and praises your taste with the warmth of a man who knows he may not see your money until next spring. If then, he cannot press you. To dun a noble customer too hard is to lose her custom and insult her at once. So he smiles, he records, and he waits, and the waiting is simply the cost of serving people like you. This is where the cruelty hides. Mr. Yarrow has his own bills, the weavers he buys from, the rent on his shop, the wages of his boy, and those creditors are not nearly so patient with him as he is forced to be with you. Your unpaid account is not a harmless delay. It is a weight that travels down the chain to people with far less cushion than you, who feel the pinch of your leisurely habits in ways you will never witness. The bills, when they come, are easy to ignore. They arrive, they are glanced at, they are placed in the drawer with the others, and the drawer is rarely opened on purpose. To actually sit and settle accounts would be to confront the gap between what you spend and what you have, and confronting that gap is precisely the thing your whole way of life is arranged to avoid. Occasionally a tradesman grows desperate enough to press, sending letter after letter, perhaps even appearing in person, and this you regard as a breach of manners rather than a fair demand. The nerve of the man to want his money. You receive the demand with the wounded astonishment of a duke accused of knowing what things cost. You may settle a little to quiet him, or you may simply take your future custom elsewhere as punishment, which hurts him far more than the unpaid bill already did. There is, beneath the silk and the bowing, a quiet brutality to the order of who gets paid. The gambling debt is settled overnight. The tradesman waits a year. The principle is not need or fairness, but honour, and honour, conveniently, is owed only to your equals. You leave Mr. Yarrow's shop with an order placed and not a coin lighter, the silk to be delivered, the bill to be filed and forgotten. You feel, as you always feel, perfectly solvent, because solvency to you is a sensation rather than a fact. The drawer fills, the weavers wait, and you glide home in your carriage convinced, as the rich so often are, that money is simply a thing that other, smaller people count. You go to Hyde Park between 5 and 6, not to walk and certainly not for the air, but to be looked at. This is the promenade, the hour when all of fashionable London circles slowly along the same stretch of path in their finest carriages, inspecting one another at a stately roll. You nod to the people worth nodding to. You note who is riding with whom, who has a new equipage, who has been seen and who has not. It is a parade with no music and no destination, and missing it is its own kind of statement. Your destination is the absence of one. You are not going anywhere. You are going slowly, in a circle, so that the slowness becomes the point, and a brisk pace would be as out of place here as a shout in church. The whole stretch of fashionable road exists to be travelled at the speed of being admired, and your coachman knows to hold the horses to an amble that borders on standing still. What is actually being displayed is everything at once. Your carriage, which announces your wealth. Your horses, which announce your taste. Your clothes, arranged to be seen from the angle a passing carriage allows. And your company, because who sits beside you is read by every other vehicle on the road as a statement of alliance, courtship, or favour that needs no words to be understood. The young men do it differently and more dangerously. A buck named Sir Crispin Vane drives his own high curricle through the press at a pace just fast enough to make the matrons gasp, showing off a perfectly matched pair and his own nerve at the reins. The curricle is light, fast, and famously eager to tip over, so half the thrill of watching Sir Crispin is the open question of whether he will round the next bend upright. He always does, barely, which is the entire performance. The greetings themselves are a finely graded currency. A full stop of the carriage to exchange words is a high honour, reserved for the few. A nod and a smile is the common coin. A cool inclination of the head says you have seen someone and chosen to acknowledge them at the absolute minimum. And the cut, the deliberate refusal to see a person at all, delivered by gazing serenely past them, is a weapon, public and unmistakable and impossible to misread. Meanwhile, your eyes are working as hard as anyone's. You catalogue the new barouche, the unfamiliar beauty, the pairing of two people whose families would never approve, the absence of someone who is always here and is suddenly not. The park is a living newspaper, printing its gossip in the language of who appears in whose carriage, and you read every edition closely because tonight's conversation will be built from it. A strange exhaustion hides in this leisure, though no one admits it. To circle the same road, smiling the correct smiles, watchful of every nod and every snub, is genuine work disguised as relaxation. You return home tired from an hour of sitting in a moving carriage, because being looked at properly is its own demanding occupation. The cruelest part is how much the absence is noticed. To skip the promenade once is to fuel a small flurry of speculation about why, and to skip it repeatedly is to begin, quietly, to fade from the picture altogether. Presence is the whole game. You must be seen regularly, in the right vehicle, in the right company, or you risk the slow social disappearance that comes to those who simply stop appearing. So you take your turn around the park at the speed of a yawn, nodding and noting, displayed and displaying, while Sir Crispin nearly overturns for the fourth time, and a duchess pretends not to see a man she has decided to ruin. The light goes golden over the trees. The carriages roll on in their patient circle. And you go home having travelled almost no distance at all, and accomplished the most important thing of your afternoon, which was to be there. You keep your own carriage, and that single fact says more about you than your name does. The carriage itself is only the visible tip of the expense. Behind it stand the horses, the stabling, the feed, the coachman, the grooms, all of it swallowing money year-round, so that you may roll through Mayfair in the correct vehicle. An open barouche announces one thing. A fast little curricle, driven by you at speed, announces another, usually that you are young and have not yet overturned. Every wheel that turns is broadcasting your income to the street. The phrase that matters is "keeps his own carriage," and it is shorthand the whole town understands. It does not mean a man owns a box on wheels. It means he can afford the horses to pull it, the stable to house them, the hay to fill them, the coachman to drive them, and the grooms to tend them, a small standing army of cost that runs whether the carriage leaves the house or not. The vehicle is cheap. The keeping of it is what separates the truly rich from the merely comfortable. One carriage is rarely enough, so you keep a fleet. There is the heavy enclosed town coach for foul weather and formal arrivals, dignified and slow. There is the open carriage for fine days, the barouche above all, low and elegant and built so the people inside are perfectly displayed to everyone outside. Each vehicle is a different sentence in the same boast, and a great household keeps several so it can choose the right one for the occasion. The barouche is the supreme object of desire, and it is desired precisely because it shows you off. Its low open shell means that when you ride through the park at the fashionable crawl, your gown, your companion, and your serene expression are all on full view, framed like a portrait that happens to move. You are exhibited by it, which is the entire reason to want one. The young men, as ever, choose danger. The curricle is light, fast, and pulled by 2 horses, and it is driven by the owner himself rather than a coachman, which is exactly its appeal. A youth named Mr. Devereux takes the reins of his own curricle through the crowded streets at a pace that makes pedestrians reconsider their choices, demonstrating his skill, his nerve, and his beautifully matched pair all at once. The curricle tips easily and kills occasionally, which only sharpens the thrill. The horses are where the real money quietly burns. A matched pair, identical in colour and stride, costs a fortune and signals one. They must be fed whether you drive or not, stabled in town at ruinous rates, and replaced when they age, so that the elegant team trotting before your barouche represents a sum that would house a tradesman's family for years. Your coachman, a weathered man named Burridge, sits high on his box in a caped greatcoat and gloves, and he is a craftsman in his own right. Burridge can thread your heavy coach through a crush of vehicles, hold a pair to a perfect walk along the promenade, and bring you to a door without a jolt, all while looking as though he is doing nothing at all. A clumsy coachman embarrasses a family. A fine one like Burridge is quietly prized and occasionally poached. What the whole system produces is a language of wheels that everyone reads fluently. The watching crowd knows, at a glance, the cost of your vehicle, the quality of your horses, the skill of your driver, and therefore the size of your income, all without a word being spoken. You cannot fake it cheaply. The carriage is a boast that must be backed, every single day, by the expensive machinery standing behind it. Behind Burridge and your matched pair you ride out, displayed in your low bright barouche, while Mr. Devereux nearly kills a fishmonger to prove a point about his nerve. You have spent a fortune to travel a mile you could have walked, and the fortune, not the mile, was always the entire purpose. You change your clothes again, because dinner approaches and the day's earlier outfit will not do. Once dressed, you face the evening's first quiet battle, the order in which everyone walks into the dining room. This is decided not by friendship but by rank. the highest lady on the host's arm, everyone else falling in behind by precise degrees of precedence. Getting it wrong is not a small thing. Seat a baron above an earl, and you have not made a mistake. You have made an enemy, and the table will remember it. The changing comes first, and it is its own labour. The clothes you wore to pay calls and circle the park will not survive into the evening, so your valet or your maid is summoned again, and the whole business of dressing begins for the second or third time that day. You have worn more separate outfits before dinner than a labourer will own in his life. Precedence is the invisible ladder everyone in the room is standing on, rigid, exact, and unforgiving. Every person at a formal dinner has an exact rank, fixed by title, by birth, by office, and that rank determines where they walk, where they sit, and who they may consider beneath them. A duke outranks, a marquess outranks, an earl outranks, a viscount outranks a baron, and below the titled spread the knights and the gentry, every rung known and counted. The hostess carries the heaviest burden, because she must arrange all of this without appearing to arrange anything. Before the evening she sits with the list of guests, and solves it like a puzzle with painful consequences. Who takes whom into dinner, who sits beside whom, how to honour the highest without insulting the merely high. A hostess named Lady Frampton is famous for getting it flawless every time, and the flawlessness is invisible, because only an error would ever be noticed. The procession itself is the public performance of the solution. When dinner is announced, the host offers his arm to the highest-ranking lady present and leads her in first, and the rest of the company pairs off and follows in strict order of rank, a slow, dignified column filing from drawing-room to dining-room. To the untrained eye, it is merely elegant. To everyone in it, it is a precise statement of where each person stands in the world, performed nightly. The danger lives in the small cases, where two guests sit close in rank, and the correct order is genuinely arguable. Put the wrong one first, and you have, in front of witnesses, declared one slightly superior to the other, and the slighted party will smile and say nothing, and never quite forgive it. Whole quarrels between families have started over a doorway, a chair, an arm offered half a second too soon to the wrong person. The seating, once everyone arrives, locks the hierarchy in place for the next 2 hours. You sit where your rank dictates, near the head if you are grand, drifting toward the foot if you are not, and your dinner companions are assigned rather than chosen. You may spend the evening beside someone dull, because the ladder placed them there, and you will be charming to them regardless, because the alternative is to be the story told tomorrow. What makes the whole system bearable is that everyone has agreed to take it utterly seriously. Nobody laughs at the column filing through the door in order of importance, because everybody in it has a place to defend and a place to covet. It is the visible shape of a world built entirely on rank, made flesh in the simple act of walking into a room to eat. You offer your arm to the lady the ladder assigns you, and file in to dinner exactly where you belong. Lady Frampton watches her puzzle resolve itself without a single piece out of place. The baron walks behind the earl, as he must. And the meal has not yet begun, but the most important business of the evening, the public ranking of every soul in the room, is already complete. You sit down to a grand dinner, and the entire table is already covered in food. This is the French style, where dozens of dishes are set out at once in a careful pattern, and you serve yourself and your neighbours from whatever sits within arm's reach. The soup nearest you, the fish across the way, the joints stranded at the far end that you will admire all evening and never taste. Between courses, footmen sweep away whole arrangements and replace them with new ones. Abundance is the message. Whether the food is warm is nobody's concern. This style has a name, service à la française, and its governing principle is display rather than dining. The dishes are arranged on the table in a strict symmetry, balanced left against right. The great centerpiece flanked by smaller dishes in mirror image, the whole thing composed like a painting meant to be looked at before it is disturbed. The first duty of the food is to be beautiful. Being eaten is a secondary career. The reaching shapes the entire meal, which is generous, symmetrical, and unreachable. You eat from what is near you, and you serve the lady beside you from the same small territory, which means your dinner is decided less by your appetite than by your seat. A dish 3 places down might as well be in another county. You spend the evening within a little kingdom of reachable plates, sending hopeful glances toward the salmon you will never meet. The sheer number of dishes is the boast made edible. A grand course is not 3 or 4 things, but 20, Soups and fishes and roasts and made dishes and vegetables all crowding the cloth at once, and there may be 2 or 3 such courses before the sweets even appear. No one could taste a tenth of it. That is precisely the point. The waste is the wealth, laid out in porcelain for everyone to admire. The removes give the spectacle its rhythm. At a signal, the footmen descend and clear an entire course away, the whole composed picture swept off and replaced with a fresh one equally vast, so the table is reborn before your eyes 2 or 3 times in an evening. A dish is brought in, set down, admired, barely touched, and removed, having served its true purpose simply by appearing. The footmen, under the butler's silent command, are the stage hands of this theatre. Mr. Garrow stands by the sideboard and conducts them with the smallest gestures, a glance, a lifted finger, and the liveried men move in near silence, carving, pouring, clearing, replacing, so that the great machine of the dinner runs without a visible hand. A well-drilled dining room feels less served than enchanted, the dishes simply arriving and departing on their own. The cost of all this beauty is that the food is frequently cold. By the time 20 dishes have been carried up from the distant kitchen, arranged just so, admired, and finally served, much of it has surrendered any warmth it once had. You eat lukewarm grandeur and call it magnificent, because complaining that the spectacular display is also slightly chilly would be to miss, rather badly, what the display was for. The conversation runs the whole length of it, governed by the same rules as everything else. You speak to the partner the seating assigned you, you keep your voice and your topics within the bounds of polite company, and you perform ease and wit across 2 hours and 3 immense courses. The dinner is a marathon of manners as much as of food, and flagging at it, visibly, is its own small failure. You work your little reachable kingdom of dishes, admire the stranded joint at the far end, and watch the footman sweep the painted table away and rebuild it twice over. You will leave having eaten modestly from a feast designed to be impossible to finish. The abundance was never an invitation to gorge. It was a statement, written in cooling food and gleaming silver, that this house can afford to set out far, far more than anyone could ever actually eat. You reach the moment, near the end of dinner, when the table splits in 2. The hostess catches the eyes of the other ladies, and as one they rise and withdraw to the drawing room, leaving the gentlemen alone with the port, the nuts, and the cigars. What the ladies may not fully picture is what happens next, which is that a chamber pot lives in the sideboard for exactly this occasion, and the conversation continues without anyone leaving the room. The sexes have separated for an hour. 1/2 drinks, 1/2 waits, then everyone politely reunites. The signal is silent and absolute. The hostess waits for the right pause, gathers the eyes of the ladies with a small look, and rises, and at once every woman at the table rises with her, as if pulled by a single string. The men stand out of courtesy as the ladies file out, and then they sit back down into a room that has suddenly changed temperature and rules. Where the ladies go is its own theatre. They withdraw to take tea and coffee, to talk among themselves, and to conduct the female business of the evening, which is no less important for being quieter. Reputations are weighed here, matches are considered, the men in the next room are discussed with a frankness the men would find unsettling. The ladies have not retired from the evening. They have relocated its real work. The men, meanwhile, settle into the part of the night they have been waiting for. The cloth is removed, the port and the nuts come out, the decanter begins its slow, clockwise journey around the table, and the talk turns to the things men say they cannot say in front of women, which is to say, politics, horses, money, and increasingly coarse jokes, the careful manners of dinner loosened by the glass. And then there is the sideboard, and the small open secret it contains. A chamber pot is kept there, discreetly, because the port keeps flowing and no one wishes to leave the warm circle of the table, and so a gentleman may relieve himself in the corner of the dining room, while the conversation rolls on barely interrupted. The ladies in the drawing room maintain a polite blankness about this arrangement, and the gentlemen extend them the courtesy of not mentioning it. The drinking is the engine of the whole interval, and it is taken seriously. A host named Sir Hector Mallow prides himself on the quality of his cellar and the quantity his guests can absorb, refilling the decanter with a steady hand long after good sense has left the room. To keep up is a point of manhood. To slide quietly under the table is a recognised hazard of accepting Sir Hector's hospitality, and his footmen are practised at the retrieval. The separation says something larger about the world you live in, where men and women occupy overlapping but distinct kingdoms. For this hour, the division is made literal: 2 rooms, 2 sets of rules, the men growing louder over the port while the ladies grow sharper over the tea. Each half spends the interval partly enjoying itself and partly wondering what is being said in the other room. The reunion, when it comes, is its own small ceremony. The gentlemen, flushed and refreshed, and some of them distinctly the worse for the decanter, rise at last and rejoin the ladies in the drawing room, where coffee is poured and the full company reassembles for cards, music, or conversation. The evening knits itself back together, the 2 kingdoms briefly one again, the port carefully not discussed. So you live through the nightly parting of the company, whichever side you fall on, the drawing room or the decanter, the tea or the port and the sideboard. It is a ritual so settled that no one questions it, a world that kept its men and its women in separate spheres, and then, each evening, let them carefully back together. The decanter completes its circle, the ladies set down their cups, and the company pretends the hour apart was nothing. You are giving a dinner, and you intend to win it. You have engaged extra hands in the kitchen, ordered more dishes than anyone can eat, and placed at the centre of the table the most expensive object in the room, a pineapple. It is there to be admired, not carved. If you are quietly less rich than you appear, the pineapple may even be rented for the evening, displayed in triumph, and returned untouched the next morning, so the next host can rent the very same fruit. Hospitality, at this level, is a performance with a props budget. The pineapple is the strangest status symbol of the age, and it earns the title. To grow one in England, you need a heated glass house, a skilled gardener, and years of patience, so a single ripe fruit can cost as much as a fine coat. That cost is exactly why it sits at the centre of your table. Nobody is meant to eat it. It is meant to announce that you could afford to ruin one if you wished. The rental is the detail that gives the whole game away. There is a brisk trade in display pineapples, hired out by the evening to hosts who want the grandeur without the full price, paraded down the table and returned intact to be rented again to someone across town next week. The same heroic fruit may tour a dozen dinners, admired by hundreds, eaten by no one, slowly going soft in the service of other people's reputations. The dinner around it is a campaign you have been planning for days. Your cook, a sharp-tempered woman named Mrs. Beach, has been ordering, prepping, and quietly threatening the kitchen staff since dawn, because a great dinner is judged in detail, and the failures are remembered far longer than the triumphs. She rules her hot basement kingdom with a wooden spoon and a long memory, and tonight her reputation rides on every sauce. The abundance is deliberate and calculated. You set out far more than the company can consume, because a table that could be finished is a table that confesses its limits, and confessing limits is the one thing the evening cannot afford. The surplus is the message. Guests should leave having seen more food than they could eat, more silver than they could count, more of everything than strict need would ever require. The guests, for their part, are keeping score. They note the number of dishes, the quality of the wine, the skill of the service, and yes, the pineapple, and they will carry the verdict back out into the world tomorrow. A triumphant dinner raises you in the general estimation. A thin or clumsy one lowers you, quietly and lastingly, and there is no appeal. You are hosting, but you are also being judged, by everyone, all evening. The cost of it all is enormous and largely invisible to the guests, which is the point. The extra kitchen hands, the mountain of food, half of it destined for the servants or the bin, the hired fruit, the candles burning by the dozen, all of it vanishes into a single evening's impression. You may spend on one dinner what your housemaid earns in years, and you will do it again next month, because the alternative is to slip, even slightly, in the endless ranking. The candles blaze, miss us. Beach sends up her triumphs from the basement, the guests admire and tally, and the pineapple presides over the table like a small gold crown that nobody dares to touch. You have spent a fortune to be thought generous. The fruit goes back tomorrow, and the only thing you truly served your guests tonight, beneath all the dishes they could not finish, was the sight of how much you could afford to waste. You have been invited to dine with the Prince Regent, which means you are about to witness eating turned into architecture. His French chef has produced something past the point of food, dozens of soups, dozens of fish, 40 separate made dishes, and great sugar sculptures rising over the table like edible buildings, you will taste a fraction of it. The rest exists to be seen. Somewhere in your host's accounts, this evening is becoming a number large enough to alarm Parliament, and you eat your truffled chicken knowing the whole spectacle is balanced on a mountain of royal debt. Antonin Carême, the chef behind it, was lured from France to cook for the prince, and he does not so much prepare dinner as compose it. His specialty is the Piece Montée, a towering sculpture of pastry and spun sugar built into temples, ruins, and fantastical buildings, set along the table as architecture you can, in theory, eat. Nobody eats them. They are there to be gasped at, and they are. Let's talk about the scale, because it defies ordinary appetite. At one famous banquet, Carême sent up something past 100 dishes, soups and fishes and roasts and approximately 40 made dishes, and dozens of sweet entremets. A flood of food no human table could ever consume. A fat eel in rich sauce, garnished with truffles and coxcombs. A round of veal enrobed in cream and finished with truffle. The menu reads less like a meal than an inventory of a small, delicious kingdom. The prince himself presides over it with the appetite that has made him a national joke and a national expense. He grows famously stout, famously self-indulgent, and famously unbothered by either, eating and drinking on a scale that his physicians note with alarm and his subjects note with resentment. To dine with him is to watch luxury performed by its greatest living amateur, a man who has turned his own appetite into a branch of statecraft. The truffled chicken on your plate is exquisite, and you eat it inside a building that is itself a scandal. The prince has poured fortunes into his houses, his Brighton palace with its domes and its dragons, his London residence so lavishly rebuilt that Parliament has held an inquiry into the cost. The dinner before you is one bright thread in a tapestry of overspending so vast that the whole nation has opinions about it. The debt is the part nobody mentions at the table and everyone knows. The prince's finances are a recurring national emergency, his debts bailed out again and again by a reluctant Parliament, his extravagance set against a country fighting an expensive war and full of hungry people. You taste the truffle and you taste, faintly, the resentment gathering beyond the palace walls, though you would never be so vulgar as to say so. What you are really attending is a performance of royalty as spectacle, the idea that a prince must dazzle to rule, that the sugar temples and the 100 dishes are not waste but a kind of statement about the magnificence of the crown. It is an old argument and a convenient one, and it grows harder to make every year, as the bills mount and the public mood sours and the spectacle starts to look less like grandeur and more like a man eating his country's patience. You dine in the glow of the candles among the edible buildings, tasting your fraction of the flood, surrounded by more food and more sugar and more debt than any sane household would assemble. Carême's temples gleam untouched. The prince calls for more, and you leave the most magnificent table in England faintly uneasy, having feasted inside a spectacle so vast and so expensive that even those who built it can no longer quite afford to keep it standing. You want a voucher for Almack's, and obtaining one will require you to submit yourself quietly and completely to the judgment of 6 women. They are the lady patronesses, and they meet every week to decide who is permitted into the most exclusive assembly rooms in London. Your wealth interests them very little. They care about your blood, your connections, your conduct, and whether you have done anything they consider regrettable. A new fortune buys you nothing here. You may be the richest stranger in town and still find the door politely, permanently shut against you. The rooms themselves are almost plain, which is the first surprise. Almack's is not a palace. It is a set of assembly rooms, handsome but unremarkable, and the splendour is entirely in the difficulty of getting inside. The exclusivity is the product, not the decor, and the patronesses understood long ago that the way to make a place the most desired in London was to make it the hardest to enter. The patronesses are the true power, and their judgments are quick, private, and final. A small committee of grand ladies, among them Lady Jersey, the Russian ambassadress Countess Lieven, and Princess Esterhazy. They meet on Monday evenings and rule on every name, and their word is final. They are not officials. They hold no title that grants this power. They have simply seized the right to decide who is acceptable, and all of fashionable London has agreed to let them. The voucher you are after costs 10 guineas and entitles you to attend the weekly Wednesday balls through the season, but the money is the least of it. Money you have. What you need is to be approved, to have one of the 6 decide that you are the right sort, well-born enough, well-behaved enough, well-connected enough to belong. The guineas merely confirm a verdict that was reached, behind closed doors, on grounds that have nothing to do with cash. The grounds are precise and merciless. Old blood weighs heavily. A title in the family, the right marriage, a spotless reputation, the patronage of someone already inside, all of these count. A whiff of scandal, a fortune made too recently in trade, a marriage the committee disapproves of, any of these can sink you, and there is no court of appeal, only the quiet, permanent fact of not being asked. Consider Lady Jersey, the most formidable of the six, who guards the threshold with a relish that her victims find hard to forgive. To be on her good side is to glide in. To cross her, or simply to fail to charm her, is to discover that the most powerful door in London has decided you do not exist. She wields her approval like a small monarch, and the strangest part is how completely everyone accepts her right to do so. The cruelty of the system falls hardest on the newly rich, and it is entirely deliberate. A family that has made an immense fortune in trade or industry, with more money than half the peerage, can still be barred, because money earned is not the same as blood inherited, and Almack's exists precisely to draw that line. The vouchers are a wall around the old elite, and the wall is patrolled by 6 women on a Monday night, deciding fortunes with a quiet word and a raised eyebrow. You make your approach carefully through the right introductions on your best behaviour, hoping to be found acceptable by a committee that owes you nothing and answers to no one. You may be admitted and feel the warm relief of having passed, or you may simply never receive the voucher and understand without a word being spoken that you have been weighed by the 6 and quietly set outside the only door in London that truly matters. You arrive at Almack's expecting splendour and discover, with the voucher clutched in your glove, that the most coveted ballroom in England is serving tea. There is no wine, there is no brandy. There is lemonade, weak claret cup, a milky almond drink, and a supper of thin bread and butter and dry cake. And you are expected to find this thrilling. The doors close at 11 and they do not reopen for anyone. The whole appeal is the difficulty of getting in. Once inside, you sip your lemonade and understand that exclusivity, not pleasure, was always the product. The refreshments are the great anticlimax, and they are deliberately so. At the most exclusive gathering in the kingdom, where dukes and diamonds fill the floor, the offering is tea, lemonade, a thin almond drink called orgeat, and a weak claret cup, with not a drop of strong liquor anywhere. The supper is worse, bread and butter sliced to transparency and cake gone slightly dry. A sparrow could finish this supper and still file a complaint. The meanness is a choice, not an oversight. No alcohol is served precisely to keep the room sober and decorous, to ensure that nothing rowdy or disgraceful occurs under the patroness's watchful eyes. The point of Almack's was never to feed you or to get you merry. The point was to gather the right people in one room and keep them on their best behaviour, and dry bread and lemonade do that admirably. The 11 o'clock rule is the iron law of the place. The doors close at the stroke of 11, and once closed they do not open again, not for a latecomer, not for a great name, not for anyone, however exalted. You learn quickly to arrive early, because the rule is enforced without mercy, and being shut out is a humiliation that the whole town will hear about by morning. The rooms reward the effort with the only thing they were ever selling, which is the company. Everyone here has passed the same test, survived the same 6 judges, earned the same voucher, and so, simply to be present is to be certified as one of the right people. You look around at a floor full of the approved and you feel, against all reason, that the dry cake and the lemonade were worth it, because they came with the certainty of belonging. The dancing is the evening's real business, and the floor is watched as closely as everything else. A young lady named Miss Ashworth moves through the figures with the careful awareness that her every step is being assessed by chaperones and patronesses alike, because Almack's is where reputations are made and matches are begun, and a misstep here echoes far beyond the room. The dancing is delightful, and it is also an examination. The genius of the whole arrangement is how it makes scarcity feel like luxury. There is finer food, better wine, and livelier company at 100 private houses across London, and yet none of them carries the weight of Almack's, because none of them is this hard to enter. The plainness is the point. Strip away the comfort and the indulgence, and what remains is pure status, distilled, and status is the only thing this crowd truly came to drink. So you stand in the most desired room in England with a glass of weak lemonade in your hand, surrounded by people who fought to be exactly where you are standing, eating bread cut thin enough to read through. It is, by any honest measure, a slightly dull party, and it is also the greatest social triumph available to you, because everyone who matters knows you are inside, and everyone who is not would give a great deal to trade places with you and your terrible, magnificent cup of lemonade. You learn the 11 o'clock rule the way everyone learns it, through a story that gets told and retold until your blood runs cold. The Duke of Wellington, the man who defeated Napoleon, the most celebrated figure in the country, arrived at Almack 7 minutes after 11, and Lady Jersey had him turned away at the door. Not delayed, turned away. If the conqueror of Europe cannot talk his way past the rule in the wrong trousers, then neither can you, and you arrive everywhere, from that day forward, comfortably early. This story is told so often because it does so much work. It is a warning, a boast, and a piece of theatre all at once, proof that the patronesses mean precisely what they say, and that no name on earth is grand enough to bend the rule. Every newcomer hears it within a week of arriving in society, and every newcomer adjusts their habits accordingly. One anecdote, endlessly repeated, keeps a whole city punctual. Who Wellington was matters here, because the scale of the snub depends on it. He was celebrated, decorated, and worshipped. This was the victor of Waterloo, the soldier who had ended Napoleon, the most lionized man in Britain, showered with honours and titles and the gratitude of a nation. If anyone could expect a door to open for him, it was this man. And the door did not open, because the clock had passed 11, and Lady Jersey had decided that the rule was the rule. The detail of the trousers makes it sharper still. By the account, the Duke arrived not only late but improperly dressed, in trousers rather than the knee breeches the rooms required, giving the patronesses 2 reasons to refuse him and the nerve to use both. It was not enough to have beaten the French. One had also to be on time and correctly clad, and the hero of the age was found wanting on all the points that Almack's actually counted. Lady Jersey emerges as the true figure of the tale, because the refusal took genuine nerve. To turn away the most famous man in the country, at the door, in front of witnesses, was an act of breathtaking confidence in her own authority, and she performed it without apparent hesitation. She did not bend, she did not apologize, she simply enforced the rule, and in doing so she made herself and her rooms more powerful than ever. The lesson lands on you with full force, and it is a useful one. If Wellington can be refused, your own consequence, whatever you imagine it to be, is no shield at all. The rules here are not suggestions to be softened for important people. They are the whole point, and they apply most pitilessly to exactly the sort of person who assumes they will not, which keeps the grand from growing too sure of themselves. What the story really teaches is the nature of power in this world, which does not always sit where you expect it. A duke commands armies and a soldier commands a battlefield, but a doorway in street. James's is commanded by a woman with a guest list, and within those rooms her word outranks his sword. Power here is social, particular, and ruthlessly local, and the man who beat Napoleon learnt its limits on a doorstep. From that day you take the warning to heart, and you are never, ever late, because you have heard what happened to a better man than you for the sin of 7 minutes. You arrive early, correctly dressed, with time to spare, and you feel a small private gratitude toward the Duke, who absorbed the lesson on everyone's behalf. The door that shut on Wellington stays open for you, simply because you took care to reach it before the clock, in the right trousers, having learned from the most expensive lateness in London. You step onto the floor for the waltz, a dance so new and so intimate that half the room considers it nearly indecent. Until recently you danced at a respectable distance, in long lines, barely touching, the whole affair conducted at arm's length. Now a gentleman places his hand at a lady's back and the two of them turn together in a closed hold, in public, and the older guests watch over their lemonade with the expression of people witnessing the decline of the nation. You, meanwhile, are simply trying to count and not be trodden on. The shock of it is the closeness. The dancers you grew up with kept partners apart, moving through figures in lines and squares, touching only briefly and formally as the pattern required. The waltz throws that out. It puts a man's hand on a woman's back, holds the two of them together, and spins them about the floor in a continuous embrace, and to a generation raised on the old distances, this looks less like dancing than like something that ought to happen behind a closed door. How it arrived is its own story, because even Almack's bent to it. The dance was novel, foreign, and scandalous. The waltz and the quadrille were introduced into those sacred rooms only recently, the waltz brought in by the Countess Leven and the quadrille by Lady Jersey, and once the patronesses themselves sanctioned the new dances, the battle was essentially over. What the six approved, society danced. The scandal did not vanish, but it acquired a powerful set of sponsors. The older generation does not surrender quietly. They line the edges of the room and they disapprove, audibly, of the spectacle before them, certain that public morality is dissolving one turn at a time. A dowager named Lady Threadgold sits rigid against the wall, lips pressed thin, watching the waltzing couples as though tallying future ruin, and her expression alone could curdle the claret cup. To her, every spin is a small surrender to chaos. For you on the floor, the reality is far less wicked and far more anxious. You are concentrating ferociously on the steps, on the count, on not crushing your partner's slippers or your own dignity, and the supposed intimacy is mostly a matter of trying not to collide. The dance that looks so daring from the wall feels, in the doing, like an arithmetic problem performed at speed while a stranger holds your hand. The partner is the heart of the matter, and not only on the floor. Who you waltz with is noticed and recorded, because to stand up with someone is a small public statement, and to waltz with them, in that close hold, is a larger one. Chaperones watch the pairings, mothers calculate the meanings, and a young woman thinks carefully about whose hand she accepts, because the dance is a sentence spoken in front of the whole room. The whole controversy says something about a world poised between an old order and a new one. The waltz is daring, modern, a little reckless, and it sweeps in despite the dowagers precisely because the young want it and the fashionable sanction it. The objections are real, but they are losing, and everyone can feel it. The future, it turns out, is something you can hear in 3/4 time, and the old guard is dancing to it whether they approve or not. You turn about the floor in the scandalous new hold, counting under your breath, your partner's hand at your back, Lady Threadgold glaring from the wall like a gathering storm. The music carries you around, the older generation despairs, and you survive the figure without disgrace, which is its own small victory. The dance that was meant to embody the collapse of decency turns out, up close, to be mostly about not stepping on anybody, and you manage it, breathless and upright, to general relief and one dowager's deep disgust. You sit down at the card table in your club, and somewhere in the next few hours you may lose more than your servants will earn in their lifetimes. The games are pure chance, faro and hazard, cards and dice, played for stakes that have no sensible ceiling. Men around you wager estates they have not yet inherited. Fortunes built over generations evaporate between midnight and dawn while everyone maintains an expression of perfect calm, because showing that you care about the money is the one truly unforgivable thing you can do in this room. These clubs are where the men of your world truly live. White's and Brooks's, the great rooms of street. James's are where you dine, drink, argue politics, and above all gamble, and membership in the right one is itself a mark of who you are. You belong here in a way you belong nowhere else, among your own kind, in deep chairs, with the cards waiting and the candles burning low into the small hours. The games are designed to ruin you efficiently, being fast, simple, and merciless. Faro is played against a bank, the bets laid on cards as they turn, fast and merciless. Hazard is a dice game of bewildering, hypnotic odds. Neither rewards skill in any real sense, which is the point. You are not matching wits. You are feeding your fortune to chance and calling the surrender a sport, and the house or the run of the dice does the rest. The stakes are what turn the games from pastime into catastrophe. There is no agreed ceiling, no sensible limit, and so a single night can swallow sums that would buy a country house, and men play on long past the point of reason because to stop while losing is to admit the loss matters. A gambler named Lord Faversham sits across from you staking figures that make your stomach turn, his face as smooth as if he were ordering breakfast. The pile of markers in front of him could rent itself out as a small county. The history of the clubs is littered with these ruins. The great Whig statesman Charles James Fox reportedly lost tens of thousands in single sittings, bankrupting himself again and again, and he was only the most famous of a long line of men who fed estates into the card table and walked away with nothing. Their stories are told in the clubs not as warnings but almost as feats, proof of a nerve so vast it could lose a fortune without flinching. The required expression is the strangest rule of all. Whatever happens, you must not appear to care. To win loudly is vulgar. To show distress at losing is far worse. A confession that the money matters to you, that you are not quite rich enough or grand enough to lose it lightly. So you sit there as your fortune drains away and you keep your face as calm as a pond, because the calm is the whole performance and the money was only ever the price of admission to it. Underneath the nonchalance lies a real and spreading damage. Estates are mortgaged to cover what the table took. Families feel the squeeze of a father's bad night for years. Marriages are arranged in haste to bring in dowries that will plug the holes the cards tore open. The smooth faces around the table conceal a great deal of quiet desperation, and the cost of last night does not stay at the club. It follows the loser home and settles on everyone who depends on him. So you take your seat among your own kind, the cards turn, the dice fall, and the candles burn down toward dawn, while fortunes shift around the table on nothing but chance. You may rise richer. You are more likely to rise poorer, and you will rise either way with the same untroubled face, because that face is the only thing the room truly demands of you. The money comes and goes. The composure must never crack, even as the estate you were born to slips card by card into the dark. You open the betting book at White's and discover that the gentlemen of England will wager on absolutely anything. Births, deaths, marriages, the weather, how long a man collapsed in the street outside will take to recover, which of two raindrops sliding down the window pane will reach the bottom first. The bets are recorded in a ledger in careful ink, signed and binding, as though they concerned matters of state. It is gambling stripped down to its purest form, money risked for no reason at all, and treating it as nothing is exactly how you prove you belong. The book itself is a club institution, a heavy ledger kept ready for exactly this purpose, and the entries in it are a portrait of a class with too much money and too little to do. Some wagers are on great public events, a battle, an election, a royal birth. Many more are on nothing whatever, on trivia and weather and the small accidents of the day, and the triviality is precisely the appeal. The famous raindrop bet captures the whole spirit, a wager pure, pointless, and serious. Two members, the story goes, sat at the club window during a shower and wagered a large sum on which of two raindrops would slide to the bottom of the pane first, then watched, in deadly earnest, as their money rode on the random track of water-down glass. It is gambling reduced to its absolute essence, a stake placed on pure, meaningless chance, and they recorded it with straight faces. The grimmer wagers reveal something colder underneath. When a man once collapsed in the street outside, members are said to have bet on whether he would live or die, and to have objected when someone tried to help him on the grounds that interference would affect the wager. Whether or not the worst versions are true, the fact that such stories attach to the clubs at all tells you how far the betting impulse had hardened into something careless about everything but the stake. A member named Mr. Carteret keeps a running pencil over the book, entering fresh wagers in his neat hand and reading out the older ones for the amusement of the room. He treats the ledger as others might treat a sporting record, and to him the line between a bet on the war and a bet on a sneeze is no line at all. The point was never the subject. The point was the wager, and the nerve to make it. The nonchalance is the entire performance, as it is everywhere in your world. To wager a fortune on a raindrop and shrug is to demonstrate that the fortune means nothing to you, that you are so secure, so bottomlessly rich, that money is merely a counter in a game. The bet is not about winning. It is about advertising, an indifference to loss that only the very wealthy can afford to perform, and performing it is how you signal your rank. Underneath the sport, of course, real money changes hands, and not everyone can truly afford the indifference they are performing. A wager entered lightly in the book is as binding as any debt of honour, and a run of bad luck at the betting book, like a run of bad luck at the card table, can quietly help to sink a man already leaning. The shrug is genuine for some and a desperate act for others, and the book does not distinguish between them. So you read through the ledger of absurd and binding wagers, the raindrops and the royal births and the bets on how long a stranger will live, and you understand that you have entered a world where money has been drained of all seriousness on purpose. To care about it openly is the only real taboo. So the gentlemen bet on raindrops with perfectly straight faces, sign their names beneath, and prove, one meaningless wager at a time, that they are rich enough not to mind. You owe money in two directions, and the order in which you pay it reveals everything about the world you live in. You owe your gambling partner from last night, a debt written nowhere and enforceable by no court. You also owe your butcher, your tailor, and the servants who keep you alive, debts that are real and recorded. And yet the rule is absolute. You pay the gambling debt first, instantly, completely, because it is a debt of honor, while the people who feed and dress you wait. Honor, you come to understand, is mostly a matter of who gets paid. The gambling debt is not legally a debt at all, which is precisely what makes it sacred. No court will compel you to pay what you lost at cards, no bailiff will come, no judge will rule against you. The debt exists purely on your word, and because it rests on nothing but honor, honor must defend it absolutely, or the whole edifice of gentlemanly trust collapses. The very weakness of the debt in law is the source of its terrible strength in society. What happens if you fail to pay it is swift and total. To welsh on a gambling debt is the ruin of you. The clubs keep books with the names of the parties, and a man who does not settle is exposed, blackballed, expelled, cut by everyone who matters, his name a byword for dishonor. You can lose a fortune at the table and remain a gentleman. You cannot fail to pay it and remain anything at all. The tradesmen, meanwhile, occupy the opposite pole entirely. Their debts are real, recorded, and legally enforceable, and yet they sit at the very bottom of your list, paid late, paid partially, sometimes never paid at all. A tailor named Mr. Stitchley sends his polite, increasingly anxious accounts, and they go into the drawer with the others while last night's card debt is settled before breakfast in full. He made your coat. The man you owe made you lose. Guess which one you pay. The servants fare little better, which is the quiet cruelty at the heart of it. The people who light your fires, cook your food, and empty your chamber pots can find their wages in arrears while you discharge a debt of honor without a moment's hesitation. They cannot ruin you, you see. They have no club to expose you in, no power to cut you, no honor of yours invested in their payment, and so they wait, holding your whole household together with one hand and an unpaid invoice in the other. You can watch the order play out in a single morning. Lord Ascot, to whom you lost 200 guineas at faro, is paid before he has finished his coffee, the notes counted into his gloved hand at your own door. Missus. Avery, your cook, who has fed the household for 3/4 on promises, is told the accounts are not quite settled and asked, very kindly, to be patient. One of them could cut you in every club in London, the other can only make the soup. You pay the one who can wound you, and you call the choice honor. There is a deep self-regard in this, dressed as principle. You tell yourself that paying your card debts proves your character, your reliability, your worth as a gentleman, and you do not look too closely at the butcher and the maid who go unpaid so that your character may shine. The performance of honor is expensive, and the cost is borne, conveniently, by the people least able to object and least able to make you care. By the time the morning is out, you have settled last night's loss, promptly and in full, and you feel the warm glow of a debt of honor discharged. Mr. Stitchley's account goes back in the drawer. The maid's wages slip another quarter behind. And you carry on, a man of honor by the only definition that counts here, having paid everyone who could hurt you, and no one who merely kept you alive. You enter the marriage market, where you are simultaneously the shopper and the goods. If you are a young woman, your face, your manners, and above all your dowry are weighed by every matron in the room within minutes of your arrival. If you are a young man with an estate, you are pursued with a focus that would unsettle a lesser nerve. Everyone is pleasant, everyone is smiling, and underneath the dancing and the lemonade, sums are being calculated, families assessed, and futures decided, all conducted with the warmth of a transaction and the manners of a ball. Beneath all its glitter, the season exists for this. The balls, the dinners, the parties, the careful introductions, all of it is machinery for bringing eligible young people together under watchful eyes so that suitable matches can be made. You may think you are dancing for pleasure. You are in fact on display in a market that runs from April to midsummer, and the whole town knows it even as the whole town pretends otherwise. The appraisal is swift, silent, and merciless. A young woman entering the room is assessed at once by the assembled matrons, her looks noted, her gown priced, her manners tested, and, most important of all, her fortune established, because her dowry is the single number that most shapes her prospects. A mother named Mrs. Harcourt can determine a stranger's marriageable value in under a minute and adjust her own daughter's campaign accordingly. The arithmetic is not hidden so much as politely draped, A great heiress, however plain, is pursued relentlessly by men who would not glance at her without the money, while a charming girl with no fortune may be admired all evening and quietly passed over by morning, because marriage at this level is a joining of estates as much as of people. Everyone knows the income attached to every name, and the income does much of the courting before a word is exchanged. The young men are appraised too, though the terms differ. An eldest son with an estate to inherit is the great prize, hunted with a determination that can alarm him, while a younger son with charm and no land finds himself warmly liked and never quite secured. You learn your own value early, whichever side of it you fall on, and you carry that number into every ballroom, whether you wish to or not. The clock presses hardest on the young women, and they feel it. Miss Larkin, in her 4th season, holds her smile a half-beat too long and watches the newer girls arrive like a fresh delivery of stock. A girl has only a handful of seasons to make a match before she is quietly reclassified as an old maid, and a 4th season without an engagement begins to look less like bad luck than like a verdict. Everyone counts, and Miss Larkin counts most of all. The shortage of men sharpens everything, because the long war against Napoleon has thinned the ranks of eligible bachelors, killed or scattered to distant regiments. There are more well-bred young women seeking husbands than there are suitable husbands to be had, and the imbalance drives the urgency, the calculation, the quiet desperation behind the dancing. The market is crowded on one side and thin on the other, and the matrons know exactly which side their daughters stand on. You move through the season as both merchant and merchandise, smiling, dancing, conversing, while the real business of weighing and pricing and matching goes on beneath the surface in every glance. Missus. Harcourt calculates. The heiress is pursued. The portionless girl is admired and let go. And you understand, beneath all the warmth and the music, that you have entered a market where the goods wear silk and curtsy prettily, and where the most romantic evening of the season is, at bottom, a negotiation conducted in dance steps. You are getting married, and before any vows are spoken, the lawyers must finish their work. A marriage settlement is being drawn up, a dense legal trust that fixes the bride's dowry, the pin money she will spend on herself, and the jointure she will live on as a widow should the worst occur. The two families negotiate these terms the way nations negotiate treaties, with trustees and clauses and signatures. Love, if it exists at all, is handled separately and quietly. The contract comes first. Romance, in your world, is the part you are permitted to improvise. The settlement is a serious legal instrument, not a formality. It creates a trust, with appointed trustees holding the assets, and it spells out in careful detail what each party brings and what each party is guaranteed. It fixes exactly 3 named sums: the dowry, the pin money, and the jointure. The bride's father provides her dowry. The groom's family commits to maintaining her, and the document binds both sides far more firmly than any sentiment ever could. The marriage is, in legal truth, a merger. The dowry sits at the centre of the bargain, the one figure that is decisive, durable, and practical. The bride brings a sum, often substantial, which is in effect an early payment of her inheritance, and that sum shapes everything: the match she can make, the terms she can command, the respect she is shown. The settlement ensures the money is used as intended, and not simply swallowed by a spendthrift husband, protecting her interest even within a system that otherwise gives her little. The pin money is a small but telling clause, and it is fought over harder than its size would suggest. It is the allowance the wife will receive for her own personal spending, her gowns, her gloves, her ribbons, her small private purchases, her independence rendered in miniature, written firmly into the contract so that a husband cannot withhold it on a whim or dole it out as a favour. A lawyer named Mr. Bellwether drafts these provisions with great care, because the amount of a wife's pin money is a quiet measure of her standing in the marriage, and families fight over it. The jointure looks furthest ahead, to widowhood. It fixes what the wife will live on if her husband dies first, securing her future against the day the estate passes to an heir who might otherwise leave her with nothing. In a world where a widow's position could be precarious, the jointure is her protection, negotiated in advance by people coolly imagining her husband's death across a table, while the couple themselves think only of the wedding. The negotiation itself can be tense and prolonged, because real money and real futures are at stake. Fathers haggle over figures, lawyers exchange drafts, trustees are chosen and disputed, and a marriage can be delayed or even broken over terms that will not settle. The romance the young couple imagine is suspended above this hard bargaining like a banner above a battlefield, and the bargaining, not the banner, decides whether the wedding happens. You can see the truth of it in the negotiating room, where your father and the bride's father sit on opposite sides of Mr. Bellwether's table and argue over a single figure for the better part of an afternoon. Affection is welcome at the wedding, even hoped for, but it is not the foundation. The foundation is the sum the two men finally write down, the scaffolding that joins the estates cleanly and carries the fortune safely to the next generation. Feeling is a guest at the wedding. Property is the host. You stand at the altar at last, the trust signed, the dowry fixed, the pin money, and the jointure neatly defined by Mr. Bellwether's careful hand, and only now are you free to feel whatever you happen to feel. The lawyers have done the real work, the families have made their merger, and the love, if there is any, arrives after the contract, a welcome addition to a bargain that was always going to be struck with or without it. You are a younger son, which means the estate, the house, the title, and the income will all pass over you to your elder brother, and you will receive a polite allowance and a strong suggestion. The system has only a few doors open to you. You may take orders and become a clergyman, accept a commission in the army or navy, or read for the law, and your family will lean toward whichever is most convenient. You were raised in luxury and trained for leisure, and now you must find a profession, quickly, that a gentleman is allowed to admit to. The cause of your predicament is primogeniture, the rule that hands everything to the eldest son. The estate descends whole and undivided to your brother, often locked that way by a legal entail that prevents it from ever being split, and the logic is to keep the great fortunes intact across the generations. It works beautifully for the family's land and disastrously for you, the second son, who shares the blood and inherits the heir. The few doors that are open are strikingly narrow, respectable, and chosen for you. A gentleman cannot stoop to trade or labour without losing his standing, so your options are narrowed to exactly 4 recognised professions: the church, the army, the navy, and the law. You did not necessarily choose any of them. One was chosen for you, on grounds of family connection, available livings, and which of your relatives can most easily arrange it. The church is the gentlest landing and a common one. A family with land usually controls a few livings, the right to appoint the clergyman to a parish, and a younger son can be settled into one of these with a comfortable income and light duties. Your brother named Edmund has been guided this way, ordained less out of burning faith than out of the happy fact that the family had a parish waiting and someone had to take it. The army and navy are the harder roads and the more dangerous. A commission can be purchased, placing a younger son among the officers, but it carries the real risk of being killed, and in these years of war against Napoleon that risk is no abstraction. Your brother Hartley bought his colours with the last sum the family would spend on him, shook your hand on the front step, and marched off to find either glory or a grave. Many a second son went the same way, sent by a family that loved him but had no land to give him, and not all of them came home. The law is the path for the patient and the clever, a respectable profession that can, with talent and time, lead to real wealth and even power. It is slower and less glamorous than a red coat, requiring years of dry study before any reward, but it is solid, and a younger son with a good head and no estate can build a substantial life on it. The deeper cruelty is the gap between how you were raised and what you inherit, which is to say almost nothing. You grew up in the same grand house as your brother, ate at the same table, were dressed by the same servants, and absorbed the same expensive expectation that the world would provide. And then you turned out to be the second son, and the world quietly informed you that all of it was your brother's, and that you would need, somehow, to make your own way. So you choose your door, or have it chosen for you, and you set off to be a parson, a soldier, a sailor, or a lawyer, carrying the manners of a great house into a life that must now be earned rather than inherited. Edmund takes his parish. Hartley marches off behind his colours, and you go out into a narrower future than the one you were raised to expect. A gentleman by birth and a working man by necessity, learning to live on an allowance and an accident of timing. You are courting, which in practice means you are almost never alone. A chaperone hovers within sight at every meeting, a mother or aunt or married friend whose entire function is to ensure nothing improper occurs, and just as importantly, that nothing improper appears to occur. The one charming exception is an ice at Gunter's, where a lady may sit in her carriage beneath the trees of the square, while a waiter darts across the road with something sweet and impossibly cold. It is as close to a private moment as the rules will allow, conducted in full view of Berkeley Square. Your chaperone is the central fact of courtship, and her presence is constant. A respectable unmarried woman does not meet a man alone, does not walk with him unaccompanied, does not sit with him behind a closed door, and so a third party is always there, watching, a guarantee made flesh that propriety has been observed. Your aunt named Mrs. Fenwick takes the duty seriously, settling into the corner with her needlework and an ear tuned to every word. Appearance matters as much as conduct, perhaps more. A reputation is fragile, public, and irreparable. It is not enough to behave well. You must be seen to behave well, because a reputation can be destroyed by the mere suggestion of impropriety, with or without the fact of it. A young woman glimpsed alone with a man, however innocent the meeting, can find herself the subject of ruinous talk, and so the chaperone guards not only her virtue but the public picture of it, which is in some ways the more fragile thing. The courtship that results is a strangely public, strangely crowded affair. You converse in drawing rooms full of people, dance under the eyes of 100 onlookers, exchange glances across rooms where every glance is noted. Real privacy is nearly impossible to come by, and the small, permitted intimacies, a dance, a turn about the room, a few words slightly apart, carry enormous weight precisely because they are so rationed. Gunter's is the loophole everyone loves, and it is a delightful one. The famous confectioner on Berkeley Square, renowned for its ices and sorbets, observes a charming convention by which a lady need not even enter the shop. She remains in her carriage beneath the plane trees of the square, and the waiters dash out across the street to serve her there, so that a couple may share an ice in something approaching privacy while remaining, technically, in full public view. The ices themselves are a small marvel and part of the appeal. In a world without refrigeration, something sweet and genuinely cold is a luxury bordering on magic, frozen with ice hauled from distant ice houses and shaped into pretty forms, and to be handed one through a carriage window on a warm afternoon is a pleasure with a faint air of conspiracy. The cold treat and the rare half-privacy combine into one of courtship's sweetest permitted moments. The whole arrangement reveals the tightrope a young woman walks between the marriage she is expected to make and the conduct she must never breach in pursuing it. She must attract a husband while never appearing to pursue one, must charm while remaining beyond reproach, must allow a courtship to flower under conditions designed to prevent anything from happening at all. The chaperone and the carriage ice are two faces of the same careful game. You conduct your romance in plain sight, with Mrs. Fenwick stitching in the corner and the whole square as your witness, stealing what closeness you can in a shared ice beneath the trees. The waiter hurries back across the road with the little glasses. The chaperone watches without seeming to watch. And you taste something cold and sweet beside the person you hope to marry, in the most private moment your world will grant you, which is to say one conducted entirely in public. You go to the opera, and the performance you are most attentive to is the audience. Your family keeps a box, and where that box sits, who occupies the boxes beside it, and who is visible from it, form a map of London society that you read all evening long. You arrive late, you talk through the music, you train your gaze across the tiers to see and be seen. The singers labour down on the stage for the few who are actually listening. For the rest of you, the opera is simply the best lit room in the city to be observed in. The box is the thing, far more than the opera. To keep a box at the opera house is a mark of standing, an expensive private balcony from which your family surveys the room and is surveyed in turn, and its location matters enormously. A box in the right tier, near the right neighbours, places you at the centre of the visible world. A poor box exiles you to the edges of notice. You are paying, in large part, for a good seat in the audience's view of itself. The real spectacle faces the wrong way, turned inward, upward, and social. While the singers perform below, the boxes perform to one another, and the evening's true drama plays out in who visits whose box, who is seen beside whom, which couples appear together, and which conspicuously do not. A great hostess named Lady Marchmont holds court in her box, receiving callers between the acts as though at a small standing party, and being admitted to it is its own quiet honour. The arriving late is deliberate, not careless. To sweep into your box well after the performance has begun is to ensure your entrance is noticed. to signal that the music is not the reason you came, and to avoid the faint embarrassment of seeming too eager for mere entertainment. Punctuality is for people who came to listen. You came to appear, and an appearance is best made once the room is full enough to register it. The talking through the music follows from the same logic. Conversation flows in the boxes throughout the performance, visiting, gossip, the business of seeing and being seen, and the singing is treated as a pleasant background to the social work rather than the point of the evening. The performers compete with the chatter of the very people who came to be seen attending them, and the chatter usually wins. The visiting between acts is the heart of it. When the curtain falls on an act, the boxes come alive with movement, gentlemen calling on ladies, friends crossing to friends, alliances and courtships advanced in brief visits conducted high above the emptying stage. To receive many callers is to be confirmed as important. To sit in a box that no one visits is a quiet public sorrow, visible to the entire house. The whole arrangement turns the opera house into a vast machine for social display, in which the art on the stage is almost incidental to the choreography and the tiers. You go, you are seen to go, you observe who else has gone and with whom, and you carry the evening's intelligence back out into the world. The opera is real, the singers are skilled, and almost no one in your circle could tell you afterward what was actually performed. A soprano could catch fire mid-aria and half the boxes would only note that she had finally done something worth watching. You arrive late into your well-placed box, nod across the tiers to the people worth nodding to, receive a caller or two between the acts, and let the music wash past as you conduct the evening's real business of being present. Lady Marchmont receives her court, the singers pour out their arias to a half-listening house. And you go home having attended the opera in every sense but the musical one, your true performance given not on the stage but in the box, to an audience as distracted and as watchful as yourself. You leave London when the season ends and return to the country estate, where the rhythm of life changes entirely. Now the days fill with house guests, long dinners, and the great masculine ritual of the shoot, where you and your friends spend cold, bright mornings walking the coverts after pheasant and partridge, while keepers and beaters drive the birds toward your guns. The country is where your wealth actually comes from, the rents and the land and the tenants. Though you spend remarkably little time thinking about that part, you are here, mostly, to be comfortable and to kill birds. Moving itself is a great upheaval, half the household packed and transported, because a family of your rank does not simply travel light. The townhouse is closed or reduced, the carriages loaded, the servants dispatched ahead to open the country house and ready it, and you arrive to find fires lit and beds aired as though the place had been waiting, breathless, for your return. In a sense, it had. The house party is the engine of country sociability. You fill the great house with guests for days or weeks at a stretch, and the entertaining of them becomes the work of the season, the long dinners, the cards, the music, the shooting parties by day and the gatherings by night. A house full of guests is a standing performance of hospitality, and your reputation as a host is built or damaged over these long country weeks as surely as over any London dinner. The shoot is the central ritual, and it is taken with great seriousness. You and the other gentlemen go out in the bright cold mornings with your guns, and an army of keepers and beaters works the woods and fields to drive the pheasants and partridges up and toward you, so that the birds rise and you fire and the keeper's careful year of work becomes an afternoon's sport. A head keeper named Pollard has nursed these coverts for months toward exactly this. The scale of the bag matters, as everything does. A great shooting day, with many guns and many birds, is a thing to be proud of and to recount, and the estates compete quietly in the quality of their shooting as they compete in everything else. Gentlemen who cannot reliably recall their own children's ages will recite a day's bag, bird by bird, for the rest of their lives. The birds exist for this. They are raised, protected, and driven for the express purpose of being shot in numbers, and the numbers are remembered and compared like scores. Meanwhile, the true source of all this comfort goes politely unexamined. The estate runs on rents, on the tenant farmers who work your thousands of acres and hand over a share of what they make, and that quiet stream of money funds the house, the guests, the shooting, the whole serene country idyll. You may ride past the farms that pay for your life without much thought, because the rents arrive the way the lit fires arrive, as if by nature. The country self is a slightly different self, and you feel the change. The frantic display of London gives way to a slower, broader comfort. The long walks, the big dinners, the easy days among guests, the satisfying ritual of the gun. It feels, out here, almost like rest, almost like the natural life of a country gentleman among his fields, and it is easy to forget how thoroughly the ease is manufactured and paid for. So you settle into the country months, your house full of guests, your mornings spent walking pollards coverts with a gun, your dinners long and your days unhurried. The pheasants rise and fall, the rents come in unseen, and you live the gracious country life that the whole towering structure of land and labour and inheritance exists to provide. Comfortable among your acres, shooting the birds your keepers raised, on an estate whose quiet machinery you are fortunate enough never to have to watch. You protect your game with a ferocity that would surprise a stranger, because the birds in your woods are not food so much as property and sport. The law is savagely on your side. A hungry labourer who takes a single rabbit or pheasant from your land can be transported to the other side of the world for it, and to discourage such people your gamekeepers set spring guns and man-traps in the undergrowth, hidden devices that fire or clamp shut on whoever stumbles into them. The luxury of your table, you rarely admit, rests on a law written in iron. The game laws are the foundation of all this, and they are merciless by design. The right to take game is reserved to the landed, hedged about with qualifications of property that exclude nearly everyone, so that the pheasant a starving family might take to eat is, in law, your possession and their crime. The rabbit in the hedge is not legally theirs to touch. The penalties are harsh out of all proportion to the act, and they are harsh precisely to keep the poor away from what the rich consider theirs. Transportation is the law's great threat. A man caught poaching can be sentenced to be shipped to the far side of the world, torn from his family and his country for years or forever, all for the taking of a rabbit. The punishment is monstrous against the offence, and it is meant to be, because the whole point is deterrence through terror, the conversion of a hungry man's small theft into a life-destroying catastrophe. The devices in the woods are grimmer still. To guard the coverts when no keeper is watching, spring guns are rigged to fire at anyone who disturbs a hidden wire, and man-traps with iron jaws are set to clamp shut on a trespasser's leg, and both are perfectly legal for much of these years. They do not ask who triggered them. A poacher, a child, a wandering labourer, all are maimed alike, and the law shrugs, because they had no business in your woods. Your gamekeeper is the enforcer of this private war, and he takes it seriously. A hard man named Mr. Thorn, watchful, joyless, and thorough, patrols the estate's edges with a gun and a grim sense of duty, setting his traps, watching for snares, ready to confront the poachers who come by night, because the coverts are his charge and the law makes him their armed guardian. He and the poachers wage a quiet, dangerous campaign in the dark woods, and men are hurt in it on both sides. The contrast with the dinner table is stark and rarely faced. The pheasant that arrives roasted and garnished at your country feast comes from these same defended woods, raised and protected so that you and your guests may shoot and eat it in comfort, while a labourer who took one to feed his children faces ruin. The same bird means sport to you and transportation to him, and the difference is nothing but the deed of the land it stood on. None of this is hidden, exactly. It simply never comes up at dinner. The hunger of the poor is no defence, and the convenience of the rich needs none. A man may be shipped across the world for a single rabbit, while the same rabbit, roasted and glazed, is carried past him on a silver dish, and the law finds nothing strange in the arrangement at all. Your woods stay stocked, your keepers stay armed, your traps wait in the undergrowth, and the pheasants rise plump and plentiful for your autumn sport. Mr. Thorn walks the boundaries with his gun. A poacher somewhere weighs his children's hunger against the iron jaws in the dark, and you dine on the protected birds in perfect comfort, the cruelty that guards them kept as far from your table as the kitchen keeps the smell of blood, present in every bite and mentioned in none. You eat strawberries in winter and grapes out of season, and you do it because somewhere on your estate a small army of gardeners is bending the calendar to your appetite. They coax fruit along in heated glass houses, force blooms in the dark, and pack ice harvested from the lake in straw so it lasts through the summer to chill your creams and your wine. The result arrives at your table as if by magic, a peach in a month that has no business producing one. You ask for it, and the seasons, at considerable expense, are quietly overruled. The glass houses are where the magic is manufactured. Long structures of glass and brick, Heated by flues and stoves, they hold an artificial summer inside while the real winter rages outside, and in that borrowed warmth the gardeners raise grapes, peaches, melons, and the famous pineapples months out of their natural season. To grow a strawberry in February is to defeat the climate itself, and you do it for the pleasure of serving fruit your guests cannot quite believe is real. The labour behind the marvel is enormous and invisible, the work patient, skilled, and thankless. A head gardener named Mr. Ashby and his under-gardeners tend these houses with relentless care, stoking the heat through frozen nights, watering, pruning, coaxing each delicate plant toward an unnatural harvest. A single February strawberry passes through more devoted hands than a newborn heir. The forcing of out-of-season fruit is among the most skilled and laborious work on the estate, and its entire purpose is to put something startling on your plate. The ice house is the glass house's cold twin, and just as clever. Cut from the frozen lake or pond in deep winter, great blocks of ice are hauled to a deep brick chamber, packed in straw and buried, where they keep through the warm months to chill your wine, set your creams, and freeze your desserts long after the last frost is gone. You enjoy a cold sweet in high summer because men cut and stored the winter for you months before. The whole system exists to abolish the seasons, which is a strange and telling ambition. For everyone else, the year dictates what can be eaten and when, fruit in its season and want out of it, but your wealth buys you a defiance of that natural order. Strawberries in winter, ices in July, peaches whenever you fancy them, all of it, a standing declaration that the ordinary limits that govern other lives do not govern yours. The purpose, as ever, is partly the eating and largely the display. A dish of out-of-season fruit set before astonished guests is a boast made edible, proof that your gardens and your gardeners can perform the impossible, and the rarer and more untimely the fruit, the louder the boast. You are not merely feeding people. You are showing them a peach in February and letting them do the arithmetic of what it cost. A quiet absurdity runs through the scale of effort spent on so small a pleasure. Whole structures are built and heated, whole winters are cut and buried, skilled men labour through frozen nights, all so that a strawberry may appear at a moment when no strawberry should, and be admired and eaten in a single bite. The mismatch between the effort and the morsel is precisely the point, because the effort is the message and the morsel is merely its delivery. So you call for fruit the season cannot provide, and Mr. Ashby's borrowed summer and the buried winter of the ice house conspire to set it before you, impossible and perfect. The glass houses glow against the frost, the ice keeps in its straw, and you eat your February strawberry without much wonder, because to you the overruling of the seasons is simply another thing money does, quietly, in buildings you never enter, on behalf of a palate that has never once been told no. You have children, and you have arranged your life so that you encounter them rarely and on your own terms. An infant is handed to a wet nurse, then raised by a nursery staff of nurses and maids in rooms at the top of the house, brought down to be admired for a scheduled half hour and then carried back up again. When your sons are old enough, they are sent away to school, to places like Eton and Harrow that are often brutal. Parenthood, in your world, is something you supervise from a comfortable distance and largely delegate. That distance begins at birth, with the wet nurse. A lady of your rank does not commonly nurse her own infant, partly from fashion and partly because frequent childbearing is itself expected of her, and so the baby is handed to a hired woman who feeds it in her stead, sometimes in her own home away from yours. The most intimate act of early motherhood is, like so much else, contracted out. Let's talk about the nursery, the children's separate kingdom at the top of the house. There, under the rule of a head nurse, your children spend their early years among nurses and nursery maids, fed, dressed, disciplined, and taught by servants, in rooms set well apart from the grand floors where you live. A nurse named Mrs. Tyndall governs this little world, and to your young children she is, in every practical sense, the warm centre of their days. Your own appearances there are brief and scheduled. The children are brought down to you, washed and dressed and on their best behaviour, to be admired for a short while before being returned to the nursery. And these visits, affectionate as they may be, are visits, not the texture of daily life. You love them, very possibly, but you do not raise them, and the difference is one your whole household takes for granted. The sons are sent away in time, and the parting is treated as ordinary. Off they go to the great schools, to Eton or Harrow or the like, where they live among other boys under conditions that can be harsh, the older boys lording it over the younger, the discipline severe, the comforts of home abruptly withdrawn. It is thought to make a man of a boy, and so the tears of a homesick child are regarded as a necessary stage, rather than a reason to reconsider. The daughters stay home, but their upbringing is delegated nearly as thoroughly. They are placed in the hands of a governess who teaches them the accomplishments thought to make them marriageable, the French, the drawing, the music, the needlework, while you supervise from a distance and appear at the appropriate moments. The girl is being shaped for the marriage market, and the shaping is skilled labour performed by hired hands. What the whole arrangement reveals is a notion of parenthood as oversight rather than intimacy, perfectly suited to a class with the means to delegate. The child is fed by one woman, raised by another, taught by a third, and seen by its parents on a comfortable schedule. And this is not regarded as cold but as correct, the natural way for people of consequence to manage the business of the next generation. Affection is real. Daily care is someone's job. Your children grow up a floor above you, in missus. Tyndall's care, brought down to be admired and carried back up to be raised. Your sons dispatched to school when the time comes, and your daughters handed to a governess. You see them, you are fond of them, you provide for them magnificently. And you spend remarkably little of your day in their company, because in your world, the raising of children, like the lighting of fires and the carrying of water, is something the rich are wealthy enough to have done for them. You employ a governess for your daughters, and you have placed her in one of the loneliest positions in the house. She is educated, well-spoken, and genteel, far too refined to eat in the servants' hall, and yet she is paid a wage and is plainly not family, so she cannot sit easily at your table either. She drifts in between, teaching French and drawing and the careful accomplishments that will help your daughters marry well, while belonging to no part of the household. You barely notice her, which is, in its way, exactly how the arrangement is designed to work. The governess is, almost always, a lady fallen on hard times. She is the daughter of a clergyman, an officer, a gentleman whose money ran out, raised to be a lady and then left without the fortune to live as one, and so she must do the one genteel thing a woman in her position can do, which is teach other people's children for pay. She knows exactly the life she was meant to have because she watches your daughters being prepared for it. The impossible middle she occupies is lonely, narrow, and isolated. She is too well born and too well educated to belong among the servants, who regard her as above them and resent her for it. And she is too obviously an employee to belong among the family, who regard her as staff and treat her accordingly. So she eats apart, neither in the kitchen nor quite at your table, a lady by birth and a servant by wage, fully at home nowhere in the house. A governess named Miss Pottersby has held the post for some years, and she conducts herself with a careful, watchful dignity that costs her something visible. She is unfailingly correct, never too familiar with the family, never too friendly with the servants, occupying her narrow ground with a precision born of knowing how easily it could be lost. Her position depends entirely on your goodwill, and she never ever forgets it. The work she does is genuine and skilled, whatever her status. She teaches your daughters the French, the music, the drawing, the fine needlework, and the manners that the marriage market demands, shaping them with real care into the accomplished young women who will one day make good matches. The irony is sharp and unspoken. She prepares them for a secure married future that was stolen from her, and she does it well. Her security is thin and her future thinner. She earns a modest wage, much of which she may send to support relatives, and she has little hope of saving enough to be independent. When your daughters are grown and married, her post here ends, and she must find another family, another set of children, another narrow middle ground to occupy, until she is too old to be wanted and faces an age with no one obliged to keep her. What her position lays bare is how precarious gentility was for a woman without money of her own. Birth alone did not protect her. The moment the fortune vanished, her refinement became almost a burden, qualifying her for nothing but the genteel near poverty of the schoolroom. She is proof that in your world a woman's security rested not on her breeding or her virtue, but on the money attached to her, and that without it, even a lady could fall to the edges of the very houses she was raised to inhabit. Miss Pottersby teaches your daughters their French and their drawing, eats her meals apart, keeps her careful dignity, and prepares the girls for the future she herself was denied. You pay her wage and rarely think of her. The servants keep their distance, and so do you. And she goes on quietly in the middle of your household, belonging to no part of it, shaping the next generation of fortunate young ladies while her own fortune, long gone, leaves her nowhere in the world to stand. You live, like nearly everyone of your rank, somewhat beyond even your enormous means. The bills accumulate in a drawer, the tradesmen send their reminders, and occasionally a creditor grows bold enough to actually press you, which you treat as a breach of manners on his part, rather than a failing on yours. To economize would be to admit the money has limits, and admitting that is more frightening than the debt itself. So you order the new carriage, you host the larger party, and you push the whole growing problem a little further down the road, where future you can deal with it. Spending beyond your means is not a personal weakness so much as a class condition. The whole apparatus of your life, the houses, the carriages, the servants, the entertaining, the season in town, costs more than even a great income comfortably covers, and the pressure to keep up with your equals never relents. To live within your means would be to fall behind, and falling behind in your world is a kind of death, so you spend, like everyone, a little more than you have. The credit that makes it possible is generous, patient, and resentful. The tradesmen extend it freely, because your custom is valuable and your rank reassuring, and so you can run up debts for years before anyone seriously expects payment. The bills come, you note them, you set them aside, and the gap between what you spend and what you actually possess is papered over by the patience of people who cannot easily afford to be patient. The drawer is where it all goes to be forgotten. The reminders arrive, the accounts mount, the careful letters from tailors and wine merchants and saddlers pile up unopened or unanswered, and into the drawer they go, out of sight and out of mind. To open it and reckon the total would be to face the truth of your position, and facing it is precisely what the whole comfortable habit is arranged to avoid. The boldest creditors eventually press, and you regard their pressing as impertinence. A wine merchant named Mr. Cobbett, owed for years, sends letter after letter and at last presumes to call in person seeking his money, and you find his persistence faintly outrageous, as though wanting to be paid for the wine you drank were a social solecism on his part. You may settle a little to quiet him, or simply take your custom elsewhere, which punishes him further. The royal example sits above it all, enormous and instructive. The Prince Regent himself runs up debts so vast that Parliament must bail him out again and again. His extravagance, a national scandal, his refusal to economize absolute. If the first gentleman of the realm lives in a permanent ocean of debt and suffers nothing worse than grumbling, then your own overspending feels not merely excusable but positively respectable, an imitation of royalty rather than a failing. The whole edifice runs on the assumption that the day of reckoning can always be postponed, and for many it can, indefinitely, the debts rolled forward and managed and never quite resolved across a whole comfortable life, but not always. For some, the borrowing finally outruns the land, the creditors combine, the estate is mortgaged past saving, and the elegant structure comes down, and those cases haunt the edges of your world as a warning you prefer not to examine too closely. So you add the new carriage to the account, throw the grander party, and slide the swelling bills into the drawer with the others, trusting, as your whole class trusts, that the reckoning belongs to some later day. Mr. Cobbett's letters go unanswered. The prince overspends a kingdom and survives it. And you carry on living a little beyond even your vast means, confident in the one belief that holds the whole glittering arrangement together, which is that the bill, whatever it is, can always be paid later by someone, somehow, just not today. You begin, eventually, to feel the whole glittering structure tremble beneath you. The cleverest dresser of the age, the man who taught England how to tie a cravat, slips away to France in the dead of night to escape the creditors he can no longer charm, and will die abroad with nothing. The prince who threw the 100-dish banquets grows old, sick, and unloved. A new and more earnest world is coming, one that will find your rented pineapples and your debts of honour faintly ridiculous. You sense on the quiet nights that the music will not play forever. Brummell's fall is the first warning, and it is a sharp one. The man who ruled fashion through nothing but taste and nerve gambles too deep, quarrels with the prince who was his great patron, runs his debts past the point of charm, and flees across the channel to escape them, ending his days abroad in poverty and madness. The arbiter of an entire age dies with nothing, and his ruin shows that the rules he embodied protected no one. not even their author. The prince's decline mirrors the era's. He grows stout, ailing, and mocked. He becomes king at last, the long-awaited crown finally his, and he wears it as a stout, ailing, deeply unpopular man, mocked in the press, resented by his people, his old extravagance curdled into something faintly grotesque. The golden youth who built the pleasure palaces becomes the bloated king nobody mourns, and the spectacle he embodied starts to look less like glamour than like waste. The world itself is turning under your feet. The long war ends, and the years that follow bring agricultural depression that squeezes the rents your whole life is built on, while new fortunes rise from factories and banks and railways, money made rather than inherited, money that no Almack's voucher can keep out forever. The old order of land and blood is being quietly overtaken by a new order of industry and trade, and you can feel the ground shifting. A new morality is rising with the new money, and it has no patience for you. The earnest, sober, hard-working temper that will soon be called Victorian regards your leisure as idleness, your display as vulgarity, your debts of honour as a kind of organised irresponsibility. The very things that made you admired, the languid days, the 5-hour toilette, the conspicuous waste, are becoming the things that will make you faintly absurd to your own grandchildren. The reckonings you postponed begin, for some, to arrive. Estates mortgaged to the gambling table and the upholsterer at last come down. Families that lived beyond their means for generations meet the creditor they could not charm forever, and the elegant edifice proves, here and there, to have been hollow all along. Not every great house falls, but enough do to show that the music was always borrowed, and that someone, eventually, has to pay the players. What goes out with it is not just a set of fashions but a way of living. Your world believed that to be rich was to be seen to waste, to perform leisure, to spend magnificently and pay your card debts and let your tradesmen wait. The world replacing it counts its money and frowns, and your gilded, idle, ruinous way of life slips from the centre of things to the margins, remembered soon as a costume rather than a life. So you sense the ending before it fully comes, in Brummel's flight and the old king's decline and the new money at the gates and the new seriousness in the air. The pleasure palaces will be mocked. The rented pineapples will seem a joke. The whole glittering, wasteful, beautiful performance will pass into legend within a generation, half admired and half laughed at. And you, who lived it at its height, will be remembered less as a person than as a picture, elegant and idle and faintly unreal, of a brief bright age that spent itself completely and then, quite suddenly, was over. And so you spent the night being dressed by committee, scrubbing your teeth into submission, paying calls in the afternoon, losing a small fortune at cards, and admiring a pineapple you were not permitted to eat. You were laced, powdered, ranked, judged by 6 women on a Monday, and turned away from a doorway for the crime of 7 minutes. You ate cold food off a beautiful table and drank lemonade at the most important party in London. It is easy, from here, to laugh at all of it, and some of it deserves the laugh. But there were real people inside those starched cravats and those impossible gowns, people who carried the buckets up the stairs and powdered the footman's hair and waited years to be paid for the coat. The governess kept her careful dignity in a house that had no place for her. The poacher weighed his children's hunger against the iron traps in the dark. The glittering world ran, all of it, on the labour of people it was built to never quite see. It was a brief age, gone within a generation, its pleasure palaces mocked and its rented pineapples turned into a joke, swept aside by new money and a more earnest world. For one bright stretch, though, a tiny handful of people lived in a luxury so complete that they never once had to carry their own water, and an entire society agreed to keep the machinery hidden behind the walls. Thank you, truly, for spending this quiet time with me tonight. There is nothing for you to carry up any stairs, no calls to pay, no cards to lose. So let your shoulders drop. Let the candles gutter out. Let the great house go dark and silent around you, the fires banked, the bells still, the whole tired performance finally over for the night. You can rest now. Sleep well.